Loyalty can blind you, and when it does, love becomes a cage you lock from the inside. Atlanta's sun had barely stretched across the sky when Vanessa Sinclair unlocked the door to the Rooted Path Foundation, a small yet powerful nonprofit tucked between a vegan bakery and a beauty supply store in southwest Atlanta. Her heels clicked softly on the polished floor as she exhaled the weight of a new week. Mondays were sacred. Morning affirmations with the staff, mentoring prep, grant emails, then heading across town for a youth empowerment seminar by noon. Everything about that morning felt typical. She'd brewed her mint tea, replied to 3 emails, and was sorting through volunteer applications when the door swung open. Not knocked, not creaked, but swung. Her head snapped up. 2 strangers in dark suits entered. Stern, no hesitation. They didn't introduce themselves immediately. Instead, one showed a badge. The other said her husband's name, Vanessa Sinclair. "Yes, we're with the Bureau. We need you to come with us. Your husband has been arrested." The room fell silent, like breath had been pulled from the air. Marcus? Arrested? There must be some mistake. We'll explain everything on the way. By the time she was in the back seat of the black sedan, her heart was pounding so loudly she couldn't hear the rest of their words. Securities, fraud, embezzlement, wire transfers, federal custody. None of it made sense. Marcus was the one who had it together. The man who color-coded their savings folders, who worked late for client strategy, calls the man who read self-help books before bed and told her she was the most grounded person he'd ever met. None of this matched him. As the car pulled into the FBI's Atlanta Division building, Vanessa wasn't thinking like a counselor anymore. She wasn't the composed woman who stood in front of high school girls, telling them to own their voices. She was just a wife with no answers, caught in a world that was shifting beneath her feet. They allowed her to see Marcus briefly. He was handcuffed but trying to appear strong, jaw tight, fingers interlaced, eyes darting between her and the agents outside the window. "They're lying," he whispered. "I didn't steal anything. Ness? Someone's setting me up." Her hands trembled, but she nodded. She needed something to hold on to. Lucian Wolfe. The name sounded like thunder rolling through her bones. "The EEO? Your client?" Marcus leaned closer. "You have to go to him. He's the only one who can stop this." Vanessa recoiled. "You want me to ask the man who had you arrested to—" "What?" "Let you go. Just talk to him. Beg him if you have to. Baby, please. I don't have anyone else." A knock on the glass ended their moment. The agent opened the door. "Time's up." Vanessa stepped back into the corridor, her mind racing. Lucian Wolfe. The name wasn't just familiar. It carried weight. He wasn't some basic tech exec. He was the name behind Wolfe Tech, a cybersecurity giant headquartered in Buckhead. Rumor had it he could find any secret and bury any scandal. Cold, brilliant, untouchable. Why would he take personal interest in Marcus? Why would a man like Lucian Wolfe risk his time, his empire, on someone like her husband? Something wasn't adding up. Vanessa stepped out of the building into the crisp air, the world moving too fast around her. Her phone buzzed. Her mentor, her sister, her intern, all asking the same thing. What's going on? She didn't have an answer, but she knew where she had to go and whatever Lucian Wolfe wanted in return. She prayed she'd be strong enough to handle it. By evening, Atlanta news stations were already spinning the story. Local consultant arrested in Wolfe Tech fraud scandal. The headline flashed across her phone screen as she sat alone in her parked car outside their modest brick home in West End. Her reflection in the glass window barely looked familiar. Eyes wide, mascara faint from tears, lips pressed into disbelief. The neighborhood kids were still playing basketball across the street. Nothing about the world had changed, except hers. This side, the house felt smaller. Every sound echoed. The hum of the refrigerator, the faint tick of the wall clock. The same home where she and Marcus hosted cookouts and laughed with friends now felt like evidence waiting to be cataloged. Her phone vibrated again. Another headline. Another text. Her pastor. Her colleagues. Even the mothers from her mentorship group. "Girl, I just saw the news. Is that your Marcus? Vanessa, are you okay? We're praying for you, sis." She typed and deleted responses. How do you explain a storm that you don't understand yourself? When she walked into their bedroom, Marcus's briefcase was gone. His laptop, too. Only his cufflinks sat on the dresser, glinting under the warm lamplight. 2 silver wolves, a gift from Wolfe Tech's annual gala. Vanessa stared at them for a long time. She remembered that night clearly. Marcus, beaming in his tux, shaking hands with executives she didn't know. Lucian Wolfe had been there, too, though she hadn't met him. She'd seen him from across the room. White suit, sharp expression, surrounded by men who spoke numbers, deals, and data like a different language. Marcus had introduced him once, casually, saying, "That man's building the future." Now that same man had destroyed theirs. The phone rang again. No number. "Mrs. Sinclair?" "Yes, this is Special Agent Grant. We'll be conducting a search of your home in the morning. Please cooperate. We have a warrant." Her knees weakened. "Search? What for?" "Documents, devices, financial records connected to Mr. Sinclair's case. We'll try to keep the disruption minimal." She swallowed hard. "My house?" "Yes, ma'am." The line went dead. Vanessa lowered the phone slowly, every ounce of certainty draining from her body. Tomorrow, the neighbors would see the government cars outside. Tomorrow, whispers would replace sympathy. Tomorrow, her name would no longer stand on its own. It would be tied to his. She sat on the bed, clutching the edge of the sheet Marcus had slept under the night before. His scent still lingered. Cedar, cologne, something she used to find comforting. Now it made her nauseous. Her eyes drifted to the framed photo on the dresser. Marcus, grinning at last year's volunteer gala, his arm wrapped proudly around her waist. The caption on the award they'd received. "Together read, for outstanding service and integrity." The irony burned. The next morning, she woke to the sound of pounding on the front door. "Mrs. Sinclair, federal agents." The search was swift but invasive. Files flipped open, drawers emptied, flash drives bagged and labeled. One of the agents found Marcus's old laptop tucked behind a shelf of Vanessa's youth development journals. He logged something down and placed it in a sealed case. Vanessa stood silently in the corner, hands shaking as she clutched her Bible. When they finally left, the house was quiet again, but not the same. Her life had been turned inside out within 24 hours. That night, she sat in her car, overlooking the skyline from Jackson Street Bridge, Atlanta glowing beneath her in gold and navy. Every building looked untouchable. She thought of Wolfe Tech. One of those towers belonged to Lucian Wolfe. She whispered to herself, voice trembling. "Why him, Marcus? Of all people, why him?" She closed her eyes, and for the first time since the arrest, she didn't cry. She couldn't, because something deeper than grief had settled inside her. Something that felt like resolve. The air inside the federal holding room was dry and sterile. Vanessa sat across from Marcus, separated only by a metal table bolted to the floor and an armed guard by the exit. She'd been allowed just 20 minutes. Marcus's eyes darted toward the camera in the corner, then back to her. "You look tired, Ness. You look Like a stranger, she replied softly. Silence fell between them. He leaned forward, whispering, "They're making a mistake. I didn't do any of this." She stared at him. "Marcus, they had a warrant. They searched our house, took your laptop, your external drives. They said your name's connected to ghost accounts tied to Wolfe Tech, offshore transfers, big ones." He scoffed. "That's Lucian playing God. He's been trying to destroy me for months." "Why?" "I stood up to him," Marcus said quickly. Too quickly. "I challenged his ethics, his data practices. He hated that. He knew I had access, so he turned it into a trap." Vanessa squinted. "But you worked for him as a contractor. You always said you were just a consultant, that he barely even noticed you." Marcus paused. That single beat of hesitation echoed louder than a scream. "People lie," he muttered. "Lucian saw I was smart, threatening. He framed me." "You didn't even tell me you were still working with him," she whispered. "I asked last month, and you said you moved on." "I was protecting you," he said firmly, voice rising. "I didn't want you in the middle of something ugly. You think I'd drag you into this?" Her eyes filled, but the tears didn't fall. "You already did." Marcus shifted, frustration cracking through his polished facade. "Ness, listen to me. The only reason I'm not already convicted is because there's still room to negotiate." She leaned in. "With who?" "With Lucian." The name dropped again, like a boulder between them. "I need you to go to him," Marcus said. "Talk to him. Tell him I'll walk away from everything if he drops the charges. Tell him you'll vouch for me. He respects you. You're clean. You're good." Vanessa pulled back slightly. "You want me to beg the man who put you in here? He'll listen to you. He's not heartless. He just thinks I wronged him. You can change the narrative." She looked at him, really looked at him. The man she married was charming, yes, but now she saw the layers beneath, desperation cloaked in charisma, excuses disguised as confidence. "Why does he hate you so much?" she asked. "Why is this personal?" Marcus's lips parted, but no answer came out, only a long inhale, followed by another weak smile. "Don't know," he said, "but you fix this." That was the final flag. Vanessa stood. The guard glanced up. "I'll think about it," she said, her voice cool and distant. "Ness." She didn't turn back. That night, she sat on the living room couch, surrounded by silence and questions. Marcus had always had answers before. Quick ones, convincing ones. But now every answer opened a new hole. The news kept playing in the background. Wolfe Tech stock had dipped. The anchor mentioned an internal scandal and pending legal matters. And then CEO Lucian Wolfe has declined to comment. Sources close to the case suggest this prosecution is personal. Personal. The word kept ringing. Vanessa closed her eyes. She didn't trust Marcus's story, but terrified her more was that she might be willing to walk into Lucian Wolfe's office anyway. Not for Marcus, but for closure. Wolfe Tech towered over Buckhead like a monument of control. Glass, steel, and silence. Vanessa stood at the lobby entrance, heart thudding behind her ribs. She'd never stepped inside before, but she'd seen it often on her drives downtown, a place that felt more fortress than office. The receptionist, crisp and distant, didn't need her to explain much. "Mrs. Sinclair?" "Yes, Mr. Wolfe is expecting you." Expecting her. The words struck her harder than she wanted to admit. The elevator ride to the 58th floor was long, quiet, suffocating. Each soft ding brought her closer to the man who had dismantled her life without ever meeting her. When the doors slid open, she was greeted not by a secretary, but by the sound of silence, the kind that hums when wealth has nothing left to prove. Lucian Wolfe stood by the window, back turned. The skyline of Atlanta spread beneath him. He didn't move when she entered, didn't greet her, just said, calmly, "Your husband sends beautiful messengers." She froze at the door. "Mr. Wolfe?" "Lucian," he corrected, finally turning. The man was composed to the point of discomfort. Tall, sharp lines, a stillness that demanded caution. His gray suit matched the sky behind him, his tone colder than both. He gestured toward a seat. "You came because Marcus asked you to. Sit." She obeyed, keeping her chin lifted even as her palms dampened. Lucian took his time, circling behind his desk. "He told you I framed him, didn't he?" Her lips parted, but no sound came. "Of course he did. It's his favorite lie. He's been telling it for years." "Then tell me the truth," she said quietly. "Please. I deserve that much." Lucian's eyes softened for a fraction of a second. Not sympathy, but curiosity. "You're different from him." He tapped a folder on his desk. "This is your husband's trail. Transfers, fake invoices, shell companies, all tied to my firm. He was sloppy enough to leave his digital fingerprints on every move." Vanessa stared at the documents. Lines of transactions, codes, account numbers. It looked like another language. But one thing stood out: Marcus's name. Lucian leaned forward slightly. "You think this was an accident? Or do you think I spent months crafting an elaborate setup to ruin a man I barely knew?" Vanessa blinked, throat dry. "He said you hated him." Lucian smirked faintly. "I don't waste hate, but I do correct betrayal." She sat back. "So that's it? You punish him and destroy his wife in the process?" Lucian's gaze held hers, steady and unnerving. "No one forced you to walk into my office, Mrs. Sinclair." Her jaw clenched. "I walked in because my husband is facing prison. Because I still believe people can do the right thing." "That's a rare faith," he murmured. "But tell me, would you keep that faith if the cost was you?" She frowned. "What does that mean?" He rose from his chair, walked to the window again, and said it without flinching. "One night with me, and I'll make your husband's case disappear." The words landed like a gunshot. For a moment, Vanessa couldn't breathe. She thought she misheard him, but his expression didn't waver. "You're joking," she whispered. "I don't joke," Lucian said evenly. "You want mercy. I want honesty. And I think you're the only honest thing Marcus ever touched." Her heart pounded. "You can't be serious." "I'm offering you a choice," he said, voice low. "Your husband walks free, or you walk away empty-handed. The justice system doesn't forgive easily, Vanessa. But I can." She stood abruptly. "You think this is leverage? You think I'd sell myself for a deal?" He stepped closer, not threatening, but deliberate. "I think you're a woman who's been lied to. And deep down, you want the truth more than you want him." The silence stretched between them, electric, dangerous. Finally, she turned to leave. "Keep your deal, Mr. Wolfe." As she reached to the door, he spoke again. "You'll be back. Not because of him, but because you'll realize I was the only one who ever told you the truth." The elevator doors closed behind her, and for the first time in her life, Vanessa didn't know whether she was walking away from a monster or toward one. Vanessa didn't sleep that night. She tried. She changed positions. She prayed. She recited every scripture she'd learned since childhood. But still, her eyes stayed open, fixed on the ceiling fan, spinning slow circles of guilt and confusion. Marcus's words echoed in her ears. So did Lucian. You're the only honest thing he ever touched. What haunted her wasn't just the indecent proposal. It was how calm Lucian had been, how certain and how deeply her husband's lies had started to shift the ground beneath her. By sunrise, she was standing barefoot in the kitchen, staring at her reflection in the microwave door. Her robe hung loosely around her frame. Her tea went cold on the counter. She picked up her phone. Her fingers hovered, and then typed 3 words. "I'll do it." She stared at them for a long time, then hit send. No response, not for an hour. Then, 8 p.m., "My driver will pick you up." The black car arrived exactly on time. The driver didn't speak, just nodded once and opened the door. Vanessa wore black, a long, elegant dress she hadn't touched in years. No lipstick, just mascara, clean lines, and a steel calmness she forced onto her face. She didn't feel like her filth, but maybe that was the point. As the elevator opened to Lucian Wolfe's penthouse, she nearly turned back, but her feet carried her forward. He opened the door himself. No assistant, no formality. Just him, in a dark sweater, no tie, sleeves pushed up to his elbows. He looked less like a billionaire and more like a man who had expected her all along. "You came," he said, his voice even. She stepped inside, but didn't respond. The space was stunning, open, glass walls showing all of Atlanta lit up like a grid of stars. But Vanessa didn't look around. She looked at him. "Let's get this over with," she said. Lucian tilted his head. "This isn't a transaction, Vanessa." She laughed bitterly. "Then what is it?" He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he walked past her and gestured to the dining table, where 2 plates were already set. "Eat first," he said. "I didn't come to eat," she snapped. "You came to save a man who lied to you." His voice was calm, but sharp. "At least eat something while doing it." She hesitated, then sat. The first few bites were awkward, silent, heavy, but Lucian didn't press. He asked if she preferred sweet over savory, if she'd always lived in Atlanta, what books she liked, which youth causes mattered most to her nonprofit. It wasn't flirtation, wasn't small talk, it was interest, and somehow that rattled her more than the proposal had. Midway through the meal, she put her fork down. "Why me?" Lucian looked up. "Because I wanted to know what Marcus ever did to deserve you." She swallowed hard. "I've met women who endure for money, for convenience, for comfort. But you," he studied her, "you walked in, ready to break for him. That's rare and tragic." Tears pricked her eyes. "Don't pretend this is noble. You're using me to settle a score." Lucian's jaw flexed. "Marcus isn't just guilty, he's cruel. You're not collateral damage. You're evidence that he always took more than he earned." She stood. Enough. He stood, too. The room grew quiet. Closer now. Just inches between them. "You can still leave," he said quietly. "No cameras, no signature, no secrets shared." Vanessa shook her head slowly. "You don't get to rewrite this. You named the price. I'm paying it." Lucian's voice lowered. "Then I won't touch you unless you ask me to." That stopped her cold. His eyes didn't burn. They didn't plead. They waited. For the first time in weeks, someone wasn't taking. He was offering choice. Had disarmed her. She stepped toward him. Just once, the tension snapped. Lucian didn't rush her. He didn't reach for her waist. Didn't lean in the way most men did when granted permission. He simply stood still, as if giving her space was the most dangerous thing he could do. Vanessa's breath slowed. Her heartbeat didn't. She stepped close enough to feel his warmth. But even then, he waited. "Why do I feel like I'm the one holding the weapon here?" she whispered. Lucian's voice was low. "Because, for once, you are." She blinked at that. There was no seduction in his words, no manipulation, just truth. Quiet, heavy truth. When she finally touched his face, fingertips to jaw, not knowing why she even did, he closed his eyes for a moment. Not from pleasure, from surrender. They moved to the center of the room without a word. No rush, no spectacle, just two people shedding the layers of loyalty, guilt, and control. The kiss wasn't hungry. It was hesitant, almost mournful, as if both of them knew this was wrong. But neither had the will to stop. His hands didn't roam. They rested, one at her lower back, the other gently brushing her shoulder. He was stronger than her, wealthier, more feared. And yet, in that moment, he held her like she was made of glass, like the act itself was holy. The city stretched behind them. But in the glass reflection, Vanessa didn't see two people betraying vows or pasts. She saw two people quietly begging to be seen. When she lay beside him later, clothed again in silence and afterthoughts, she stared at the ceiling, different from the one she'd looked at in her own home the night before. Different, because she was different. Lucian sat up beside her, rubbing his hand over his face. Not out of regret, out of something else. He spoke first. "You don't owe me anything after this." Vanessa turned to him slowly. "And Marcus?" Lucian nodded. "The case will lose traction. The federal heat will cool. But what happens to your husband after that is no longer up to me." She sat up. "So that's it. You bought one night and cashed out the debt?" He looked at her. Really looked. "You think that's what this was, isn't it?" Lucian rose, walking toward the window. "When I offered that deal, I expected you to hate me, to loathe me. I built my career on control. But tonight," he paused, "I lost it." Vanessa wrapped the sheet around herself, her voice soft but clear. "Why?" Lucian stared at the skyline, then said something he'd never told anyone. "Because you saw me, and I didn't ask you to." She didn't answer, not yet, because a part of her, the part that had been hiding behind a wife's duty, a counselor's wisdom, a woman's silence, knew this night hadn't been about Marcus at all. It had been about her, and for the first time in a long time, she had allowed herself to feel something that wasn't duty, or fear, or sacrifice. She had felt wanted, not for what she could fix, but for who she was. When Lucian walked her to the elevator, he didn't touch her hand. He didn't whisper promises or future plans. He just stood there, still, quiet. Right before the doors closed, he said, "You changed everything." And Vanessa, tired, torn, raw, whispered back, "So did you." Vanessa Sinclair walked into the Center for Young Minds like she did every weekday morning. 2 minutes early, coffee in hand, braided bun tied high, and a gentle smile that masked whatever she carried from the night before. The center was her second home. Not the building, the mission. She didn't just counsel troubled teens. She mentored them, fought for them in school board meetings, called their mamas when they slipped, and showed up in court when no one else did. Her voice held weight in the room, not because it was loud, but because it had earned trust. Raised in the heart of Southwest Atlanta, Vanessa was a product of the same neighborhoods she now served, Adamsville, West End, and sometimes up through Cascade Heights. Her childhood was marked by resilience. A father who worked 2 shifts at the water department. A mother who made quilts on Saturdays while blasting gospel and frying catfish. Church on Sundays wasn't a choice. It was rhythm. Life revolved around sermons, cookouts, and the smell of coconut oil in her mother's scarf drawer. After finishing Clark Atlanta University, Vanessa could have left. She had offers, social work positions in D.C., New York, even Chicago. But she stayed. Her heart never left the South, and neither did her sense of duty. Most mornings, she'd wear soft makeup, gold hoops, and flats. Today was no different. Her schedule included a one-on-one session with a 16-year-old girl who just got kicked out of school, a parent support group, and a speech at a local charter school later that evening. In between, she would find time to stop by Mother Janice's porch, the 78-year-old widow who never missed Vanessa's greens on Sunday and always insisted on feeding her banana pudding in return. Everyone in the neighborhood knew Vanessa, but they didn't just know her name. They respected it. Her voice had become a source of calm in a community that knew too much chaos. That's why when she walked down Campbellton Road, heads turned with warmth. Not because she was flashy, but because she belonged. When her phone buzzed that morning, she glanced at the screen without breaking stride. Text from Marcus. "Have a good day, sweetheart. You're a force." She smiled faintly. They hadn't spoken much the night before, but Marcus had a way of sending just the right message at just the right time, even when everything between them felt like it was sliding. She tapped back. "You too. Love you," and didn't wait for the reply, because in her world, there was no time for self-doubt, only movement. The Sinclair home sat quietly in West End, tucked behind a line of magnolia trees and set far enough from the road to feel private. A modest two-story with brick siding and a wraparound porch Marcus always promised to stain next spring. Inside, things looked perfect, at least on the surface. Wedding photos lined the hallway. 2 pairs of shoes, neatly arranged near the front door. A handwritten sticky note on the fridge that read, "Meeting at 4. Chicken in the fridge. Love you always." It had been there for days. Vanessa noticed Marcus had started to come home later and leave earlier. Not suspiciously so, but enough to chip away at the quiet routines they'd once built together. There were no arguments, no slammed doors or sharp words. Just pauses, gaps. Dinners were still eaten together, but not always cooked together. Their laughter still came, but less often, less freely. When they spoke, it was mostly about work, his clients and projects, her non-profit, and the kids she worked with. They shared a bed, but their dreams had started to stretch in different directions. Wasn't anger. It was a soft erosion. Vanessa had asked once, "You good?" Marcus had smiled, kissed her forehead. "Just stressed, babe. But when this deal clears, everything changes." He'd said the same thing last month, and the month before that. She stopped pressing. What gave her pause wasn't the hours he kept. It was the energy. The way he tensed when his phone lit up after 10 p.m., the way he'd excuse himself to take calls outside, then come back inside more silent than before. He'd always been ambitious. That was one of the first things she loved about him. The way he dreamed, the way he spoke like his future was already in motion. But lately, it felt like Marcus wasn't building something. He was hiding from something. Still, she didn't accuse. Vanessa was raised to support her man, especially when life got heavy. Marriage was more than butterflies. It was grit and faith. So she waited, hoping he'd come to her when he was ready, hoping his quiet didn't mean the ground was breaking beneath him. Vanessa was halfway through a session with a student named Layla when her assistant Tanya burst into the room. "I'm sorry, Ness, but you need to come now." Vanessa stood, confused. "What's wrong?" "There's law enforcement outside. A lot." The next 10 minutes moved in slow, fragmented seconds. Sirens weren't blazing, but 3 unmarked vehicles blocked the parking lot. Men and women in black windbreakers stood outside with clipboards and folders. One of them stepped forward when Vanessa emerged. "Mrs. Sinclair?" "Yes, I'm Agent Rollins, FBI. We have a federal warrant for the arrest of Marcus Sinclair. Is he here?" Vanessa's heart sank. "Here? No, he's not. What is this?" "We have evidence linking him to financial fraud and securities violations tied to Wolfe Tech Systems. We've been monitoring his movements. We'll need access to your home as part of the investigation." Tanya covered her mouth. Staff, clients, kids, they were all watching. Vanessa fought to keep her voice steady. "Marcus is at work." Rollins nodded to one of the agents. "We'll proceed." Within minutes, texts and camera flashes started popping. Someone was recording. The Sinclair name, once spoken with pride around the block, now stood under a storm of scrutiny. Vanessa called Marcus. No answer. She called again. On the 4th attempt, he picked up. "Babe, don't speak. The FBI is here. They're looking for you." "I know. They found me." "What?" "I'm at the office. They're arresting me now." Vanessa's knees weakened. She gripped the wall for support. "Tell them it's a mistake, Ness. Tell them I didn't do anything." The line cut, and everything she thought was stable collapsed. Later that afternoon, Vanessa sat in her parked car outside Ebenezer Community Market, her phone buzzing like it had a mind of its own. News alerts. Breaking. Local nonprofit leader's husband arrested in tech scandal. Marcus Sinclair accused of embezzling millions from Wolfe Tech. Group chat. "Vanessa, I'm so sorry. What do you need?" "Sis, this can't be real. I'm praying for you." "Did you know? Were there signs?" She turned off her phone. Inside the store, people stared. Not with cruelty. Not yet. But with confusion. With pity. An older woman from church reached out gently. "Baby, how are you holding up?" Vanessa gave the answer she was raised to give. By grace, but grace felt thin today. By the time she got home, reporters had already knocked on 3 neighbors' doors. Her porch light flickered as she entered the house. The silence felt like a stranger. Her phone rang again. This time, it was her mentor from college. "Miss Charlene, Vanessa, don't disappear. You hear me? I'm not. This too will pass. Just stay steady." Vanessa's voice cracked. "I don't know how to stand in this." Miss Charlene paused. "Then lean until you remember how." 3 days passed before Vanessa was allowed a video call with Marcus. She logged in from her bedroom, pillows stacked behind her, robe wrapped tightly around her waist. Marcus's face filled the screen. Tired, scruffy, unshaven. "Babe." She didn't smile. "I didn't do this," he said quickly. "You have to believe me." "I want to, Marcus. But I need more than belief right now. It's Lucian Wolfe. He's setting me up." Her brows pulled together. "You had. He barely knew you." Marcus hesitated. "We had some conflict. He didn't like how close I got to some internal files. I was onto something." Vanessa folded her arms. "You lied to me. About working with him. About your hours. About your money. I was trying to fix it." She blinked back heat. "No, you were trying not to get caught." Marcus leaned forward. "Listen to me. There's still a window. Lucian's not going public yet. If you talk to him, woman to man, he might back off." Vanessa's jaw tightened. "You want me to go to the man who had you arrested? Please. He respects you. You have poise. He'll listen." She didn't respond, just stared. And in that moment, she realized something deeper. Marcus wasn't asking for truth. He was asking for rescue. And he was asking her to be the one to offer herself. Wolfe Tech was no ordinary company building. It loomed above Peachtree Street like it had never once bowed to failure. Its angles were sharp, the glass flawless. Everything about it suggested surveillance, control, silence. Vanessa stood outside the entrance for nearly 5 minutes, unsure whether to go in. Wasn't dressed to impress. A fitted navy blouse, tucked into high-waist slacks. Flats, no jewelry but her wedding band. Her fingers trembled slightly as she reached for the revolving door. Inside, the lobby was polished stone and clean lines. No music played. Noise drifted, just the sound of expensive shoes across marble and a digital screen looping company accolades. "Can I help you, ma'am?" the receptionist asked, barely glancing up. Vanessa leaned forward. "Vanessa Sinclair. I'm here to see Mr. Wolfe." The woman's fingers paused over the keyboard. "Is he expecting you?" Vanessa swallowed. "I was told he would be." A single tap, a moment of pause. "Then you can take elevator C, 58th floor. He'll meet you directly. No badge, no pass, no waiting." As she stepped inside the glass elevator, her reflection stared back at her, unreadable, but visibly frayed. She clenched her hands to stop the shaking. This wasn't just a visit. It a confrontation. The air thinned as the elevator rose. Each passing floor peeled back layers of her confidence, leaving only her conviction exposed. By the time the doors opened, she stepped out into a world of quiet power. Minimalist design, floor-to-ceiling windows, brushed gold fixtures. It was intimidating without trying, and Lucian Wolfe stood in the center of it, arms folded, watching her like a man who had planned her arrival months ago. Lucian Wolfe didn't move immediately. He let Vanessa cross the space between them slowly, her heels echoing on the polished floor. She stopped a few feet from his desk. "You're earlier than I expected," he said. "I didn't come for pleasantries," Vanessa replied. Lucian's gaze was sharp, but not impatient. "Good. Neither did I." He motioned to a chair, but Vanessa remained standing. Lucian studied her face, his expression unreadable. "You don't look surprised to be here." "I'm not," she said. "I'm just angry it came to this." He tilted his head slightly, as if filing that response away. Lucian wasn't loud. He didn't use dramatic gestures or lean on charm. He was precise, the kind of man who thought 3 steps ahead and showed none of it. His voice never rose. "Didn't need to. Your husband's file is on my desk. You want to see it?" Vanessa hesitated, then nodded. Lucian walked behind his desk and tapped the screen. The monitor flickered, revealing spreadsheets, email logs, transaction records, and surveillance images. He didn't narrate. He let the evidence speak. Vanessa leaned forward, slowly. There it was, Marcus's name on ghost accounts, crypto transfers, offshore wire transactions, mail threads with aliases, timestamps, matching the nights he said he was working late, and surveillance stills. A parking garage, Marcus in a hoodie, a handoff, encrypted hard drives. Lucian leaned back. You married a man who wanted power. He just didn't want to earn it. Vanessa blinked hard. Why are you showing me this? Because he told you. I framed him. And I don't tolerate liars. She clenched her jaw. Why didn't you straight to the courts? Lucian's gaze hardened. Because this is personal. That stopped her. His expression didn't change. But for a moment, Vanessa felt something shift. Not sympathy, but a shadow of pain. She said nothing because she was finally starting to realize Marcus hadn't just stolen from a company. He had crossed a line with a man who didn't forget. Lucian tapped again. More files opened, including transcripts of Marcus's previous employment. One of them dated back nearly 8 years. "What is this?" she asked. "Context," Lucian replied. Vanessa read slowly. A startup, 2 CEO founders Marcus had consulted on a launch, gained access to back-end systems, and left abruptly. 3 months later, the startup folded. Lawsuits had followed, but no one had the funding to pursue it. The report ended with one CEO founder's suicide. Vanessa covered her mouth. "What does this have to do with you?" Lucian's voice tightened. "The man he sabotaged was my brother." Silence. Vanessa stared at him, stunned. Lucian didn't blink. "Marcus destroyed something I loved long before Wolfe Tech." Her voice cracked. "You've been waiting all this time to punish him." Lucian shook his head once. "I let him live his lie until he brought it into my house. I warned him 3 times. This isn't revenge, it's closure." Vanessa backed away from the desk, arms folded tightly across her chest. Her breath caught in her throat. Everything was shifting again. Not just Marcus, but the path that led them here. "You didn't frame him," she whispered. Lucian's tone remained cold. "No, but I did make sure he couldn't run." Vanessa sat down for the first time since entering the room. Her hands were still shaking, but she kept her spine straight. "I don't want to believe all this," she said, "but I can't ignore it either." Lucian's eyes didn't soften, but his voice lost its edge. "You came here because you wanted something. Say it." She swallowed. "Drop the charges, or ease them. Please." He leaned forward. "Why?" "Because I loved him," she whispered, "and I can't watch him rot without knowing I tried." Lucian tapped his pen twice, then stopped. The pause between them lengthened into something uncomfortable. Then he said it. "One night with me, and I'll make your husband's case go away." Vanessa stood, eyes wide. "What? You heard me." She backed away. "This a joke?" "No. You think you can buy me." "I think," Lucian interrupted, "that Marcus used you as a shield. I think you've spent years carrying a man who only saw your worth when he needed your loyalty. I'm giving you a chance to choose for once." She stared at him. "This is disgusting." He didn't deny it. He just waited, because he knew she wasn't walking out because she was offended. She was walking out because a part of her was afraid he was right. Vanessa didn't speak a word the entire elevator ride down. When she reached the lobby, she walked straight out into the street, letting the wind hit her hard across the face. The city was loud again. Cars, voices, chaos. But it all felt distant. She went home. She turned off the lights. She ignored every text. She sat on the couch with her knees pulled to her chest and stared at the empty spot where Marcus used to throw his keys. Every sound in the house reminded her of what was no longer true. She poured a glass of wine, didn't drink it. She took a shower, couldn't feel the heat. She laid in bed, arms crossed tightly, staring at the ceiling. The fan above spun in slow circles, like her thoughts. Lucian's voice kept repeating in her mind. "I think you've spent years carrying a man who only saw your worth when he needed your loyalty." The part that stung was how accurate it felt. At 2:47 a.m., Vanessa sat at her dining table, phone in one hand, her other hand trembling against her cheek. She stared at the contact in her phone for a full 5 minutes before pressing it. The line rang once, twice, then, "Wolfe." She didn't speak. Lucian's voice remained quiet. "Vanessa?" Her lips parted. "I'm not agreeing," she said softly. "But I'm not sleeping either." Lucian exhaled, not triumphantly, but like a man who had expected this all along. "Do you want to come back?" he asked. She paused. Then the one thing she wasn't ready to admit. "I just want to understand why this hurts more than it should. Have you ever felt cornered by love? Would you protect your partner or protect yourself? Let's talk about it in the comments. And if this story's already got you hooked, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share with someone who needs to hear this kind of truth. The car glided through the quiet streets of Buckhead, headlights slicing through the early night. Atlanta had slowed, but Vanessa's pulse had not. She sat in the back seat of the sleek black sedan, wrapped in silence and discomfort. The driver didn't say a word. He didn't need to. His job wasn't to question. It was to deliver. She clutched her coat tighter around her, as if fabric alone could shield her from the reality she was stepping into. The phone call had been short. No details, no promises, just an agreement. The elevator to the penthouse moved too fast and not fast enough. Her reflection on the mirrored panel didn't offer any reassurance. She looked elegant, black silk blouse, tailored slacks, minimal jewelry, but inside she felt exposed. When the doors opened, she was greeted by quiet, not silence, stillness. Lucian Wolfe stood by a wide glass wall, the city behind him glittering like a world she no longer belonged to. He didn't turn at the sound of the elevator. He didn't speak. The space was designed like him, restrained, powerful, precise. Every piece of furniture was intentional. Every light dimmed to perfection. And yet the room felt colder than she expected. Vanessa stepped out. Lucian turned then, his face unreadable. "You came," he said. She nodded. "Barely. I didn't come for dinner," she replied. He motioned toward the sofa. "Anyway, I didn't prepare any." She remained standing. Lucian studied her in silence. "You're angry." "I'm here, aren't I?" "That doesn't answer my question." Vanessa took a slow breath. "I don't know what I am." Lucian nodded once, like he understood more than he let on. "That," he said, "you don't have to figure it out." Standing up, Vanessa finally took a seat, edge of the sofa, back straight, arms crossed lightly. She kept her eyes fixed on a point across the room, never directly at him. Lucian didn't sit. He remained standing, one hand resting on the back of a nearby chair, posture casual but intentional. "You've been carrying a lie for longer than you realize," he said. "Is that what this is about?" She shot back. "A lecture before the transaction?" He lifted a brow. "You think this is a transaction?" Vanessa's lips pressed into a tight line. "What else could it be?" Lucian stepped closer, but kept his distance. "It could be perspective." She looked up then, for the first time. "Perspective?" "Yes. I could have had you sign something, made you document what this night meant. I didn't. That doesn't make it noble." He didn't flinch. "It makes it yours." His voice didn't rise. His tone didn't accuse. It observed, like a man dissecting a subject without intent to harm, only to understand. Vanessa stood again. You watch people like you're waiting for them to justify your view of the world. Lucian walked to the corner bar, poured 2 glasses of water, and offered her one. She didn't take it. He set hers down gently on the glass table. You think I hate Marcus because of what he stole. But that's not it. She stayed silent. I hate him, Lucian continued, because of what he wasted. Vanessa looked away. You don't know him. I know the damage he left in his wake. I've spent years paying for his recklessness. Financially, emotionally. My brother's company was his first play. He manipulated the system because he assumed no one would notice. That's not ignorance. That's strategy. She finally met his eyes. And you're not here for justice. You're here for control. Lucian smiled faintly. We're all here for something. Vanessa sat down again, this time with less armor. Lucian didn't press. He sat across from her, glass untouched. You could have told me everything in one meeting, she said. So why this? He shrugged slightly. Because I wanted to see if you'd still come, even after knowing who I am and who your husband really is. She looked at him. You assumed I would. I hoped you would. The words hung heavier than she expected. She watched his hands. No rings, no twitching, no tension. But there was something in his eyes. Curiosity masked by control. Did you ever love anyone? She asked suddenly. Lucian paused. Yes, once. What happened? She believed in my potential more than I believed in my pain. Vanessa's brow furrowed. And you let her know? No, he said. She walked when she realized I was never going to ask her to stay. That answer hit her in a place she didn't expect. She shifted, unsure what to say next. Lucian leaned forward. Why did you marry Marcus? Vanessa swallowed. Because he made me feel seen and strong. And he waited. Chosen? Lucian nodded. Now I feel, stupid. He tilted his head. You're not stupid. You're loyal. Vanessa closed her eyes for a second, fighting back the sting. Lucian's voice softened. When was the last time someone held you and didn't want anything? She didn't answer. He didn't reach for her, but the air shifted, not with pressure, but with invitation. They moved to the balcony. Cool night air brushing against their faces. The skyline stretched endlessly. Vanessa sipped the water Lucian brought earlier. He stood beside her, hands in his pockets. My mother raised us alone, Lucian said. She was strong, but tired. My father left when I was 11. Promised he'd send money. He never did. Vanessa didn't speak. Lucian continued. My brother was softer, more trusting. He didn't survive the world I learned to conquer. Vanessa's voice was quiet. You blame Marcus for that. Lucian looked out into the dark. I blame myself for not protecting him. They stood in silence. Then Vanessa spoke. My mother was the opposite, overbearing, protective. My father was quiet, tired. He stayed, but sometimes I wished he hadn't. Lucian glanced at her. I learned how to carry peace in public and war in private, she said. It's what made me good at my job and terrible at being vulnerable. Lucian nodded. Saying, she turned to face him. What do see when you look at me? He didn't answer quickly. Finally, someone still trying to forgive herself for things she didn't do. The words opened something in her. Not lust, but understanding. Back inside, the atmosphere changed. Not with urgency, but with a quiet shift in how close they stood, how long their eyes lingered, how much their walls had fallen. Vanessa stepped forward, not pulled, just drawn. Lucian didn't touch her until she touched him. When she reached for his hand, he laced his fingers with hers, slow and certain. They didn't speak. She pressed her forehead to his chest. He wrapped his arm around her shoulder. No words, no seduction, just closeness. They moved together like a silent truce was forming between them. Every movement was a question, every breath a response. And when she laid beside him later, neither of them needed to explain what had just happened. It wasn't about desire. It was about being witnessed. Lucian lay beside her, one arm resting behind his head, his other hand tracing slow patterns along her shoulder. Vanessa stared at the ceiling. For once, her mind wasn't racing. It was still. She spoke first. What happens now? Lucian didn't move. You decide. She looked at him. You're not what I expected. I'm not here to be expected, he replied. They fell silent again. Eventually, she turned to him. Why me? He didn't hesitate. Because you're nothing like he said you were. The words fell gently, but struck deep. She didn't ask who he was. She didn't need to, because in that moment she knew Lucian had never truly hated her. He had been waiting for someone who reminded him of who he used to believe in. And now that someone was her. The house was darker than she remembered. Not physically. Every bulb still worked. The porch light flicked on automatically. But as Vanessa stepped through the front door that evening, something in the air felt wrong. Or maybe she had just changed so much in a short time that the house no longer fit around her. She locked the door behind her, hung her coat, slid off her shoes. These were the motions of normalcy, but none of it felt real. The scent of her lavender diffuser still lingered in the hallway. Marcus's jacket was folded neatly over the arm of the couch. Their wedding photo still sat centered on the entryway table. Him in a gray suit, her in cream and pearls, both smiling like life was only ever going to get better. She couldn't look at it. Vanessa drifted through the house like a guest. She paused in the kitchen, ran her fingers along the counter, opened the fridge, closed it again. She didn't want food. She didn't want sleep. She wanted to peel her skin off and start over. Everything about her felt touched, not just her body, but her soul. Lucian's presence still lingered on her skin, like a faint shadow. But it wasn't the night itself that haunted her. It was what it revealed about her marriage. Bowed herself, she walked to the mirror in the hallway and stared. Her eyes looked tired, her lips pale. Her body carried a kind of heaviness that wasn't weight. It was grief, quiet grief for a love she thought was real, for a man she thought was good. She knew now that her life had split in two. There was the woman she had been before she walked into Lucian Wolfe's world, and the one who stood in this hallway now. Marcus returned home 2 days later, released on bond under conditions set by the court. Vanessa stood by the window when his car pulled up. She didn't greet him. She didn't open the door. She just waited until he walked in. "Hey," he said, gently closing the door behind him. She nodded. "You're out for now." They stared at each other. He dropped his keys in the bowl near the door and walked toward her slowly. "You okay?" he asked. "I'm fine. You look tired. So do you." He tried to close the gap between them, reaching for her waist, pulling her in. But Vanessa stepped back. He frowned. "Did something happen?" She didn't answer. "I just meant, did the press show up again? Did they call you in for questioning?" Vanessa forced a breath. "No, I've just been busy." He tried again. "I've missed you, Ness." She blinked. "You were gone for 3 days. That's still time apart." His voice was softer than usual, more intentional. He moved around the kitchen, started making tea, offered her a cup without asking. He asked what she wanted for dinner, offered to cook. Every move was deliberate, affectionate, attentive, cautious. But Vanessa knew Marcus, and Marcus didn't become attentive unless he felt threatened. That night, as they lay in bed, he curled behind her. "You smell different," he murmured. She froze. He kissed her shoulder. "New soap?" "No," she lied. His hand lingered at her hip. "You're tense." She nodded. "Is it me?" This time, she didn't lie. Yes. Vanessa began checking everything she once trusted. The next morning, while Marcus was in the shower, she walked into the small home office and pulled open the drawers. Receipts, old contracts, spare keys, a phone charger. She moved to his desktop. Password protected. She typed in the anniversary date. Denied. Tried his mother's birthday. Denied again. She grabbed the tablet from his nightstand. Same result. Her gut twisted. He used to leave his accounts open. Used to let her check their shared budget. Now she realized she hadn't seen a full breakdown of their finances in months. When he left to run errands, she pulled open the filing cabinet. Buried in tax forms and property records, she found something strange, a printed wire confirmation. From 2 years ago, a large sum transferred to an offshore entity in a name she didn't recognize. The memo field read, "Consulting payout." Her hands trembled as she looked closer. It wasn't just the amount. It was the routing destination, a location Lucian had mentioned in passing during their meeting. The realization burned through her spine. Marcus hadn't just misled her. He had built his lies with intention. That evening, when Marcus returned, she pretended not to notice the perfume sample in his coat pocket, a luxury women's brand she'd never worn. She didn't confront him. Not yet. She was done asking questions she already knew the answers to. Now she was hunting truth for herself. Vanessa took the printed wire transfer and slid it into her journal. She needed more. The next day, she reached out to an old friend, Kyla, who worked in private compliance for a financial consulting firm, someone who didn't owe Marcus anything and owed her everything. "I need you to trace something for me," she said. Kyla didn't ask why. She just said, "Send me everything." That night, Vanessa handed her a scanned copy of the document and 3 screenshots of emails she secretly snapped from Marcus's tablet when he fell asleep. Kyla called her the next day. "Girl, I hope you're sitting down." "I am." He's been pulling money through layered accounts since at least 2019. The shell names are designed to reroute funds through marketing firms, dummy nonprofits, and high-end real estate trusts. Some of those accounts touch Wolfe Tech. Others don't. Vanessa held the phone tighter. And the people tied to those accounts. One of them was a man named Elijah Wolfe. Your husband was on email threads with him until 2016. Her blood ran cold. "Elijah?" she whispered. "Lucian's brother." "Yeah, I didn't catch it at first. But that's not coincidence." Fifth, Vanessa's stomach turned. Marcus had lied, but worse, he'd done it long before he met her. He had secrets buried deep enough to reach the grave of another man. Flashbacks of Marcus being manipulative begin to replay in her mind. That night, Vanessa couldn't sleep. She sat on the couch with a blanket over her legs, replaying old memories in her mind like short films that suddenly made too much sense. She remembered the time Marcus showed up late to her community fundraiser with flowers and a forced smile. after she'd overheard him on the phone, speaking too quickly to someone he refused to name. She recalled their vacation to Savannah, when he abruptly changed hotels after a business partner spotted him, and asked her to delete photos she'd taken on the balcony. She remembered asking about missing money once, a dip in their joint account. He had laughed, held her chin, and said, "Baby, I'm building something. You always said you trusted my vision." Had. Because she loved him, but didn't erase reality. Love, real love, didn't need to be protected by silence or lies. Vanessa sat quietly, tears finally sliding down her cheeks. She wasn't grieving the man she married. She was grieving the woman who kept making excuses for him. The community room at the East Point Youth Center buzzed with midweek energy. Folding chairs were set in rows, clipboards were passed around, and laminated goal charts were propped against the walls. Vanessa stood at the front, shoulders squared, voice steady, but her hands trembled behind the podium. She had barely eaten in 2 days. Her thoughts were scattered, her stomach uneasy, but she powered through, her words anchored in conviction. These were her kids, her community. She wouldn't let her personal unraveling bleed into their hope. Change doesn't start with policies, she said. It starts with us deciding we won't let statistics define us. We're not numbers. We're not case files. We're futures in motion. A wave of applause followed. One of her students, Kyla, nodded proudly. But as Vanessa stepped back from the mic, her vision blurred. She blinked hard. The floor shifted slightly beneath her. A sharp pain bloomed low in her abdomen. Then everything tilted. The lights, the voices, the room. Someone shouted her name. Her knees gave out before her voice could answer. When she woke, the room was white and humming, not with applause, but with medical equipment. And 4 pierced her arm. A monitor beeped beside her. Her head throbbed. She turned slowly, recognizing the sterile space immediately. Hospital. A nurse entered with a calm smile. "You're awake." Vanessa blinked. "What happened?" "You fainted during your event. Someone called 911. Thank God they did. You were dehydrated, exhausted." Vanessa sat up slowly. "Is that all?" The nurse hesitated. "Well, we ran some blood work. It explains a lot of your symptoms." Vanessa's breath caught. "You're pregnant," the nurse said gently. "Roughly 6 or 7 weeks." Vanessa sat frozen in the hospital bed, heartbeat pounding louder than the monitor beside her. "Pregnant?" Her eyes blurred again, but this time from a flood of disbelief. She touched her belly, flat, unfamiliar, and suddenly carrying a world she hadn't planned for. 7 weeks. She counted backward. Her hands shook. The night with Lucian, and a few days before that, one last moment with Marcus. Hurried, disconnected, but possible. She couldn't breathe. The nurse placed a soft hand on her shoulder. "You don't have to process everything now, but we'd like to schedule a follow-up. You're stable, but stress won't help." Vanessa nodded blankly. "Is there someone you'd like us to call?" "No," she said too fast. "I'll handle it." That night, at home, she lay on the couch in the dark. The house was quiet. Marcus had stepped out, claiming he needed fresh air. She didn't ask questions. She stared at the ceiling fan again, always spinning, always moving, always giving the illusion of air, even when nothing changed. She turned to her side, pressing a pillow to her stomach. Her breath came in short, controlled waves. The math haunted her. The night with Lucian had shattered her, but now it might define the rest of her life. She wasn't ready to decide what to feel. She was still trying to understand what this even meant. Vanessa waited until the next morning. The sun was barely up. The kitchen was quiet, except for the click of the toaster and the faint hum of the refrigerator. Marcus entered, shirtless, yawning, scratching the back of his neck. "Morning," he mumbled. She didn't say it back. He looked at her. "You okay?" "I need to tell you something," she said. Marcus froze, sensing the shift instantly. Vanessa's voice was calm, measured. "I passed out yesterday. I was at East Point. They rushed me to the hospital." His brow furrowed. "Why didn't you call me?" She stared at him. "I found out something there." He walked closer. "What is it?" She said it clean, without flinching. "I'm pregnant." Marcus stopped mid-step. Silence. Then, "What? You heard me?" His jaw twitched. "How far along?" 7 weeks. Maybe 6.5. Marcus moved to the sink, turned the faucet on, then off again, as if trying to stall time. "You're sure?" Vanessa's arms folded tightly. "Yes." He nodded slowly, then turned around. But his expression wasn't joy. It was alarm. "Are you happy?" she asked, though she already knew. He opened his mouth, closed it. "I just didn't expect this," he said. Her stomach dropped. "You don't even look relieved." He tried to correct himself. "I'm just thinking. That's all. There's a lot going on." Vanessa stepped back. "You're not scared because it's unexpected. You're scared because this baby might not be yours." Marcus went quiet again, and in that silence, Vanessa got all the confirmation she needed. Later that day, Marcus paced the living room, like a man on the edge of confession or collapse. Vanessa watched from the hallway, arms crossed. He finally spoke. "Listen, this changes things. Clearly, I mean for both of us. Everything's been out of balance. We need to talk, Ness." "Then talk." He sat on the edge of the couch. "I want to be the man you deserve. I do. But there are things I haven't told you, things I buried to protect us." Vanessa's stomach turned. "What things?" He rubbed his hands together. "Before you, there were deals, risks. I got involved with people who..." She cut him off. "Lucian's brother, Elijah." Marcus's head jerked up. "How do you know that name?" Her stare was cold. "Because your past isn't as buried as you thought." He stood. "Whatever you think you know. I know you were in communication with him before his company collapsed. I know you moved money. I know you used aliases." Marcus's face drained of color. "You went digging," he said. "No," she replied. "I woke." He moved closer. "Ness, this baby, if it is mine, can be a fresh start. We can still build something." "If," she echoed. He froze again. "Get out," she whispered. He didn't move, so she said it again, and this time he left. 2 days passed. Vanessa stayed quiet. She took walks, slept in the guest room, ate in silence. The baby, the possibility of life, felt too loud to ignore now, too sacred to politicize. And still, she needed answers. She dialed Lucian's number just after 10 p.m. He picked up on the first ring. "Vanessa," he said, not surprised. "I need the whole story," she said. He was silent. She continued. "Not as your whatever this is. Not as the woman you spent the night with. I need to know what happened between Marcus and Elijah." Lucian's voice was level. "I'll tell you everything. But I won't make it easier to hear." "I don't need easy," she said. "I need real." They met in a private conference room on the lower level of a quiet midtown hotel. No guards, no distractions. Lucian brought a file, paper documents, old photos, transaction histories. Your husband, he began, posed as a venture specialist back in 2016. He befriended Elijah during a funding cycle, gained access to back-end infrastructure, investor lists, and early-stage patents. Vanessa's fingers clenched. He sold 2 of Elijah's prototypes to an overseas competitor, lied about investor pull-outs. And when the deal collapsed, Elijah was blamed for insider leaks. Lucian paused. He spiraled. Vanessa's eyes burned. He reached out to me once before it happened. I ignored the call. I thought he wanted money again. Lucian looked down. He died 2 days later. Vanessa let the file fall into her lap. Marcus walked away with a payout, Lucian said, from the competitor he secretly fed information to. She stood? Why didn't you go to the authorities back then? Lucian looked her in the eye. Because I didn't want justice. Then what? I wanted someone to know the truth. Someone who mattered to him. So he'd finally lose something that couldn't be bought. Vanessa closed the file, and for the first time since discovering she was pregnant, she felt free. Vanessa sat on the edge of the bathtub, arms wrapped tightly around herself, as the steam from the shower fogged up the mirror. The room was silent, save for the soft drip of a leaking faucet and the invisible pressure thundering in her chest. She had just come from Lucian's office. What was meant to be a neutral, tension-free meeting had turned into something that unraveled everything she'd kept tightly wound. Lucian hadn't touched her. He hadn't even crossed the professional line. But it was in the way he looked at her, like he knew her, really knew her. That frightened her. And what frightened her even more was how she didn't pull away from that gaze. She'd felt seen in a way Marcus hadn't made her feel in months. Now here she was, clutching her stomach, as if her grief had taken on a physical form. Her marriage had cracks before Lucian. But Lucian, he'd become the earthquake that shook the foundation. The guilt came in waves. She closed her eyes and remembered Marcus's face the night before. Ashen, gaunt, but alive. He'd finally gotten a second chance, thanks to Lucian's intervention. A medical connection, a specialist flown in from New York, the promise of cutting-edge treatment, a second chance she'd begged Lucian for on her knees, not as a lover, but as a desperate wife. And yet, last night, she dreamt of Lucian, not his touch, but his voice, his silence, his restraint. That cold exterior he wore like armor, yet it peeled away in flashes of unexpected humanity when he was around her. He hadn't once tried to win her, and maybe that's why her heart had started trembling every time he walked into a room. She slammed her palm against the tiled wall, hard enough to startle herself. "Stop it," she whispered fiercely, tears mixing with the humidity on her cheeks. "You're a married woman. Your husband is fighting for his life. But love wasn't the only thing dying. Trust, that was long gone. The way Marcus had looked at her last night, like he didn't recognize her anymore, crushed her. She had offered him a spoonful of soup, and he stared at her hands like they were foreign, like they belonged to someone else. That silence, it was louder than any accusation. She stepped out of the bathroom and into their bedroom, his side still rumpled from where he'd lain awake most of the night. There was a time when they'd fall asleep holding each other, whispering dreams about vacations and home ownership. Now they barely spoke beyond treatments and doctor visits. Her phone buzzed. A message from Marcus's sister, Claudette. "People are talking. 5th. The church women saw you at Wolfe Corp. Again. Maybe don't go there so often." Vanessa's eyes widened. Her heart thudded. So now even Claudette was implying something. She dropped the phone. Rage, hot and bitter, began to boil in her gut. Not at Claudette, not even at Marcus, But at the entire twisted situation, she had sacrificed everything: her peace, her pride, her emotional safety, to get help for Marcus. And now, because Lucian Wolfe happened to look at her with softness instead of contempt, suddenly she was the one being watched. The grief turned into guilt. The guilt became rage. She picked up the picture frame from their nightstand, a photo of her and Marcus at the community fundraiser 3 years ago. She was laughing. He was gazing at her like she was his whole world. She pressed the frame to her chest, let out a broken sob, then carefully placed it back. "I didn't ask for this," she whispered to the quiet room. "I didn't ask to feel confused. I didn't ask for Lucian Wolfe to be the only one who listens." But here she was, unseen by the man she vowed to love, and emotionally exposed to the man she was supposed to hate. Vanessa collapsed on the bed, the ceiling above swirling in a blur of thoughts she couldn't make sense of. All she knew was that something had shattered, and she wasn't sure if it was her marriage, her loyalty, or simply her. The office was dim, curtains drawn to keep out the midday glare. Lucian stood by the whiskey cabinet, untouched, hands in his pockets. Vanessa sat rigidly across the room, still in the conservative blazer she'd worn to hide her trembling. She hadn't planned to come, but his assistant had sent word that Lucian requested a private and final conversation before the contract for Marcus's treatment was finalized. "I owe you the truth," Lucian began, not looking at her. His voice was low, nearly hoarse. Vanessa blinked. "I thought you said this wasn't about revenge." "It's not. It never was. Not with you." He finally turned, his expression unreadable. But there was a tension in his jaw that betrayed something deeper, something unresolved. "I came after Marcus because I needed answers. Closure. The kind a court case or press leak wouldn't give me," he said. "But you were never part of that plan." Vanessa's heart pounded. She hated how much her body reacted to his presence, how she noticed the way his voice dropped an octave when he was being real. What was I, then? Lucian moved slowly, deliberately, and sat in the leather chair across from her. "A mirror." Her brows furrowed. "You remind me of who I used to be. Before all this. Empire building and vengeance. Before I learned that being good in this world gets you trampled." Vanessa felt a chill crawl up her arms. She folded them across her chest, more for comfort than defense. He sighed. "I saw something in your eyes that terrified me." "What?" "Hope." The room was silent, thick. "I never intended to manipulate you," he said. "I just needed access to Marcus's case, his connections, his records. But the more I saw you fight for him, the more I realized you weren't my enemy." "Then why did you test me?" she asked, voice shaking. "The way you looked at me, talked to me." "Because I didn't trust myself." Vanessa's breath hitched. Lucian leaned back, eyes cast upward. "I've spent the last decade building walls. My father's betrayal, my mother's public disgrace. I made a vow, never let emotions drive my decisions again. But then you walked into my building and shattered all that." His confession wasn't romantic. It wasn't dressed in apology or seduction. It was raw. "I didn't plan on feeling," he admitted. Vanessa looked down at her lap, fighting back tears. "Neither did I." They sat in silence, and for the first time, it didn't feel like a standoff. It felt like a truth neither of them wanted, but one they could no longer deny. Vanessa returned home late. She'd gone straight from Lucian's office to the clinic for Marcus's latest test results. The news had been better than expected. His blood work showed signs of improvement, but the moment she stepped through the front door, the cold draft in the house said otherwise. Marcus was sitting in the living room, alone, staring at nothing. "Hey," she said softly, placing the envelope with the results on the table. He didn't turn. She moved closer. "The labs look good. The treatment's working. Lucian's team, really. Did you sleep with him?" The question came out like a slap. Vanessa froze. "What?" He turned to her now, pale, sick, but his eyes were sharp, piercing. "I asked if you slept with him." "Wolfe." Her breath caught. "How can you even ask me that?" "Because everyone's talking," he hissed. "The women at church, Claudette, even Deacon Paul hinted at it when he prayed for our fractured household. You think I don't hear things just because I'm weak?" Vanessa stepped back, heart pounding. "I've watched you slip away, Vanessa," he said. "I'm dying, and you're falling for the man who holds the knife. That's not fair." "What do you want me to think?" he barked. "That all these private meetings, these favors, he's doing them out of charity." Tears streamed down her cheeks. "I begged that man to help save you, Marcus. I swallowed my pride, my pain, everything, so you could live. And you repay me with accusations?" Marcus's voice cracked. "I'm sorry. I'm scared, and jealous, and humiliated. I don't even know how to be a husband to you anymore." Vanessa stared at him, broken. "Then, maybe, stop tearing down. The only person still standing beside you." He looked at her then, really looked, and she saw the pain, the fear, the fading man she had once loved. "I didn't sleep with him," she said. "But you've already decided who I am now, haven't you?" She left the room without another word. Behind her, Marcus whispered, "I'm sorry," but it was too late. Something had snapped, and it wouldn't be mended with a single apology. The overnight bag sat quietly on the edge of the bed, half-zipped, holding pieces of a life that had unraveled too fast for Vanessa to catch. The house was silent, eerily so. Marcus had dozed off in the guest room after a nurse administered his latest injection. The emotional blow-up from earlier still hovered in the air like invisible ash from a fire that hadn't fully burned out. Vanessa folded her last blouse slowly, her movements deliberate but heavy, like her body was mourning every fabric she touched. She glanced around the bedroom. Photos, books, the faint smell of eucalyptus oil from their diffuser. All familiar. But none of it felt like home anymore. She hadn't made the decision impulsively. It had been fermenting for weeks. Tonight had simply uncorked it. She walked over to the dresser and opened the top drawer. Nestled in the corner was her wedding band. She hadn't worn it since Marcus's hospitalization, partly due to the practicalities of hospital gloves, and partly because something inside her had shifted. She picked it up, stared at the tiny engraving on the inside until the end. A bitter chuckle escaped her throat. The end of what? Love? Trust? Us? She placed the ring gently into the drawer and closed it. Downstairs, she scribbled a note on the back of a prescription pad. "Marcus, I need time to think, to breathe. I never stopped loving you, but love is drowning here. I'll keep checking on you through Claudette and the nurse, Vanessa." She placed it beside his pills and turned off the kitchen light. The air outside slapped her skin as she stepped into the night, a light breeze ruffling her blouse. Her car was packed with essentials, but she wasn't running away. She was choosing peace, not Lucian, not another man's arms, not revenge or escape, just peace. She drove to a small Airbnb on the edge of town, far enough to avoid gossip, close enough in case Marcus needed her. It was a studio apartment above a retired teacher's garage. Simple, quiet, safe. That night, she lay on a twin mattress on the floor, staring at the ceiling, listening to the hum of cicadas outside. No Lucian, no Marcus, just Vanessa. And for the first time in a long time, She let herself cry. For herself, the following Sunday, the pews felt colder than usual. Vanessa sat near the back of the sanctuary, not in her usual spot beside Marcus. She kept her head low beneath her wide-brimmed hat, hoping to go unnoticed. But in a small town, there is no such thing as unseen. Whispers floated like incense through the air. Left her husband. I heard she's been meeting with that Wolfe man again. Such a shame. Always thought she was a good woman. The sermon, ironically, was about grace. Pastor Glenn's voice echoed through the rafters. Do not judge, lest ye be judged. Vanessa wanted to believe it wasn't aimed at her. But when she caught the narrowed glance from Deacon Paul's wife, who had been like a second mother to her, it stung deeper than Scripture ever could. After service, she exited quickly, but not quickly enough. Sister Lorraine, always dressed to the nines with a matching hat and gloves, intercepted her near the front doors. You doing all right, baby? She asked, her tone sweet but sharp at the edges. I'm managing, Vanessa replied softly. You know, sometimes women these days forget how to stand by their men in hard times. Vanessa's heart clenched. She smiled politely, offered a quiet bless you, and kept walking. Outside, she found her car keyed. Just one deep scrape, but it was the message etched beside it in dust that turned her stomach. Jezebel. She didn't cry. Not here. Now, at home, or rather, the Airbnb. She made tea with trembling hands. The kettle hissed louder than usual. Her phone buzzed. A text from her old college friend, Natalie. Girl, is it true? People saying you moved out on Marcus and ran to Lucian Wolfe? What is happening? She stared at the screen, then powered the phone off. Another text had come in earlier that day from an old friend from the hospital board. You were always too ambitious. Fifth guess. Now everyone sees it. Vanessa wrapped herself in a shawl and sank onto the floor, letting the tea grow cold in her hands. The betrayal from strangers was one thing, but from the people who once hugged her after prayer circles, that was different. The only light came from the window, moonlight catching the dust motes in the air. They could whisper all they wanted. She knew her truth, but knowing didn't make the loneliness sting any less. The knock came around 9 p.m. Vanessa hadn't expected anyone. She hadn't even told anyone where she was staying, except Claudette, who promised discretion. She peeked through the curtain. Amara, her cousin, best friend, practically a sister. The woman who held her hand when their grandmother died. The woman who helped her pick her wedding dress. Vanessa opened the door slowly. Amara didn't wait for an invitation. She pulled her into a fierce, bone-deep hug. I've been waiting for you to call me, Amara said, voice breaking. I didn't know what to say. You didn't have to say anything. You just had to let me in. Vanessa crumbled in her arms. They sat on the floor with mugs of reheated tea. Amara didn't ask many questions at first. She just listened. And when Vanessa finally spilled everything, Lucian's role in Marcus's treatment, the emotional conflict, the whispering neighbors, Amara didn't flinch. You did what you had to do to keep your husband alive, she said. And now you're doing what you have to do to keep yourself alive. That's not betrayal. That's balance. Vanessa stared at her. Everyone thinks I'm a traitor. Everyone is not living your life. Let them stay mad in their little perfect pews. Later that week, another surprise. Lucian sent a letter, a real, physical envelope, delivered to her Airbnb door. No business logo, no signature. Just a plain card with 2 sentences. I never wanted to be the reason you broke. but I'll be here if you need someone to help you rebuild." There was no manipulation, no ask, just a statement. She folded the card and placed it in her journal. The next day, Claudette stopped by, arms full of groceries. She didn't say much, just unloaded the fridge and kissed Vanessa's forehead. "He's still healing, but you matter too." Then came Sister Irene, a quiet, elderly woman from church who rarely spoke. She knocked on the Airbnb door with a tray of sweet potato pie. "I've known you since you were 10, she said. "Folk talk, but God sees, and I still do too." Vanessa's heart cracked open. They didn't flood her with affirmations. They didn't try to fix anything. They simply showed up, and that was everything. As she stood at the window that evening, looking out at the quiet street below, Vanessa whispered to herself, "I'm still standing, not because of Marcus, not because of Lucian, but because the people who truly knew her heart had never left." The air in the small co-working hub smelled faintly of fresh paint and brewing coffee. The walls weren't lined with art, but with intention. Community board flyers, event posters, and photos of local leaders framed in black and gold. In the corner office, Vanessa sat at a modest desk, laptop open, notebook full, and a mug of tea steaming beside her. The name was bold, but intimate. The Ripple Project, empowering Black women through justice. It was more than a name. It was a lifeline, born from pain, refined through fire. Vanessa had spent months grappling with shame, public judgment, and the silence that echoed in her soul. But after the betrayal, after the whispers, after her own breaking point, something had shifted. She stopped waiting to be rescued. Instead, she started creating what she wished existed when she felt most alone. It started with research, quiet nights, scrolling through statistics and legal sites, learning how disproportionately Black women were penalized, how many were caretakers for incarcerated loved ones, how often they were overlooked in the system. Her own experience, dealing with legal advisors, clinic paperwork, the emotional weight of advocating for Marcus while barely surviving herself, had given her more than enough context. But she wanted facts. She wanted clarity. She applied for a local community grant under a pseudonym, pitched her concept in front of a diverse board, and was shocked when the approval came. Not because of who she knew, but because of the why. The first week, she worked out of her borrowed Airbnb. The second, she moved into a small office near the library. By the third, she had 4 volunteers, 2 law students, 1 formerly incarcerated mother, and a church friend who had quietly supported her even when others turned away. Their mission was focused: offer free legal workshops, provide emotional counseling for women navigating justice-related stress, connect women with local Black attorneys, social workers, and family law advocates, host story circles where women could speak without judgment. Vanessa didn't want pity. She wanted change. She designed the first brochure herself, wrote the welcome letter with her own words, printed them on donated cardstock, and passed them out outside clinics, libraries, and Sunday markets. When women came, nervous, hesitant, broken, she looked them in the eye and said, "You're not alone," because she had once been them. One evening, while closing up, she found a letter slipped under the door. "Your voice saved me from silence. Thank you." There was no name, just initials. Vanessa pressed the note to her chest. She wasn't healed, but she was helping others find a way through the wreckage. And somehow, that was helping her too. The auditorium buzzed with energy, not the kind that came from glamour or spectacle, but from the raw, grounded presence of truth. Folding chairs were packed. Volunteers were handing out water bottles and program pamphlets. At the front, a long panel table held 5 speakers, all women, all black, all powerful. Vanessa sat third from the left. Her blazer was crisp, her hair pulled back into a low twist, minimal makeup, just enough to reflect who she was now. Whole, humbled, rising. This was her first public appearance since everything went down. The whispers, the exile, the move out, the abandonment of the wife label, without abandoning her heart. The event, titled Justice and Grace, Conversations for Community Healing, was hosted by a local advocacy center. Vanessa had almost said no when they invited her. Fear lingered in her stomach, like old smoke. But when she stood to speak, the fear melted away. She placed both hands on the podium and took a breath that felt like the first full inhale in months. Good evening. My name is Vanessa Sinclair. I'm the founder of the Ripple Project. I'm also a caregiver, a former ICU nurse, a woman who nearly lost herself trying to save someone else. The crowd stilled. I've walked into courthouses where no one looked like me. I've had to fight through systems designed to silence, not support. And I've watched as women like me were forgotten, labeled, dismissed. She paused. Her voice did not shake. But I'm still here. Soft murmurs of affirmation spread through the crowd. A few nods, a few quiet from elder women in the third row. I didn't start this nonprofit to be praised. I started it because I know what it feels like to be judged by people who don't know your whole story, to be cast aside by the very people you prayed beside in pews. Now the murmurs turned into subtle applause. She raised her eyes to the back of the room and saw familiar faces. Not all friendly, but not hostile anymore. Pastor Glenn, her high school teacher, Ms. Beasley, even Claudette had shown up, seated beside one of the law students from Ripple. Vanessa smiled softly. I'm not asking for anyone's forgiveness. I'm building a table where none of us need permission to exist. When the panel ended, people lined up, not to confront her, but thank her. An elderly woman from her neighborhood clasped her hands. I misjudged you, child. I'm sorry. What you're doing, it's bigger than all of us. Even Sister Lorraine stood at the back, lips pursed, but eyes softer than they'd been in months. And later, after the crowd thinned, a woman approached quietly. No makeup, hoodie, holding a manila folder of court documents. I need help, she whispered. Vanessa opened her arms. That's why I'm here. Respect wasn't something she demanded. It was something she rebuilt, one broken conversation at a time. Weeks after the panel, the Ripple Project's momentum doubled. An unexpected financial windfall allowed them to expand their services. The organization could now offer child care stipends during sessions, fund emergency transport for women navigating court dates, and hire a part-time therapist. The source? Donation. Silent. Large. Clean. It appeared through a legal firm in New York, an LLC, with no public ties to any known non-profit donor. At first, Vanessa chalked it up to divine favor or a sympathetic philanthropist, until Jasmine, one of the law students, dug into the paperwork. Vanessa, she said one evening, as they closed the office, that donation? It came through a shell corporation. Vanessa looked up from her notes. What kind? A structured LLC. LW Strategic Holdings. I checked the registration. Vanessa blinked. Her throat dried. W. Lucian Wolfe. Are you sure? Jasmine nodded. He's not listed, but the address roots back to an investment arm, registered under Wolfe Corp. Vanessa's stomach fluttered, not in excitement, in disbelief. She excused herself, walked to the empty conference room, and sat quietly. He had never mentioned it, never called, never sent word. No press, no attention, just help. Silent help. She stared at the wall. 1,000 emotions ran through her. Gratitude, confusion, frustration, admiration. Lucian hadn't interfered. He hadn't used the donation as leverage or a doorway back into her life. He had simply seen the work and responded. For a man who had once chased vengeance, this felt like a quiet apology. Or maybe a salute. She didn't call him, didn't text, didn't write. Instead, she went back into the main room, handed Jasmine a new task list, and said, "Let's keep building. Someone out there believes in us." It had been 3 weeks since Vanessa discovered Lucian's anonymous donation. She hadn't reached out, not because she didn't want to, but because she wasn't sure what she would say. "Thank you. I'm grateful. I'm not ready." But today, she stood before a mirror, adjusting the name badge pinned to her blazer. Vanessa Sinclair, Director, The Ripple Project. She took a deep breath and headed into the conference room of a regional community equity summit in downtown Atlanta. She wasn't here to speak, just to observe and connect. That's when she saw him, Lucian Wolfe, not across a boardroom, not behind a desk, but in a room full of social advocates, in a dark suit with no tie, standing quietly near the back, observing the panel discussion on community impact investing. He looked different, less polished, more present, his hair slightly tousled, no assistant in sight. Vanessa felt her pulse quicken, but she forced herself to remain grounded. She didn't walk toward him. She simply returned her focus to the presentation. After the session ended, she turned toward the hallway, only to find him already approaching, with that same quiet command he always carried. "Ms. Sinclair," he greeted, his voice calm, almost soft. "Mr. Wolfe," she replied, holding her tone steady. They stood at a polite distance, the low hum of conference chatter around them. No one paid them special attention, just two professionals, meeting by chance. Vanessa raised an eyebrow. "You came all the way here for a panel on nonprofit investing." His lips twitched. Not quite a smile. "I was in town. Figured I'd see what integrity looks like when it's not filtered through lawyers and shareholders." She didn't smile either, but she didn't look away. "I know about the donation," she said simply. "I figured you would," he replied. "I didn't do it for a thank you. You did it because." Lucian's eyes held hers, unflinching. "Because I believed in the mission. Because you built something that matters. And because helping you was the only decent thing I could do without making it about me." There it was, honesty, stripped of ego, stripped of motive. Vanessa exhaled. "I appreciate it," she said, her voice quiet but certain. He nodded once. "I didn't want you to think I disappeared out of guilt. I just knew you needed space." "And I still do," she replied, not unkindly. "But that doesn't mean I don't recognize what you've done." He nodded again, slower this time. "I'll always be in your corner, from whatever distance you need." The words landed gently. No seduction, no games, just respect. He turned to leave, but paused. "If you ever want to talk about anything, you know how to reach me." Vanessa didn't respond right away, but as he walked away, she allowed herself to watch. Not as a woman drawn to power, not as a wife grieving her marriage, but as a human being acknowledging another. Later that night, Vanessa stood alone in her small apartment, fingers wrapped around a mug of ginger tea, the quiet hum of the city street below her window filling the silence. Her inbox was full. Ripple was growing fast. 2 potential partnerships, 1 grant acceptance, and 3 speaking invitations. She had become a symbol, but inside, the healing still had miles to go. Her mind drifted to Lucian, not the powerful CEO, but the man who had stepped back when she needed him to, who gave quietly, who showed up at the conference with no entourage, no headlines, no hidden angles. Still, her heart wasn't ready. She wasn't sure if it ever would be. There were still nights she woke up remembering Marcus's accusations, his pain, the guilt of almost giving up. There were days she questioned if she would ever trust her own heart again. Lucian had given her space, but even space didn't guarantee peace. Healing wasn't linear. Some days she felt strong. Other days she felt shattered all over again. Tonight was one of those in-between nights. She sat on the couch and opened her journal. I am proud of the woman I'm becoming. I am not fully healed. I still grieve. I still carry guilt. But I am not who I was. I don't need to be saved. I just need to keep choosing myself. She closed the book gently. The knock on the door startled her. It was past 9 p.m. When she opened it, she found a package on the doorstep. No note, no sender. Inside, a single hardcover book, Women Who Rise, Stories of Grace, Justice, and Rebirth. She smiled. She had spoken about this book during her panel. She had mentioned how much it inspired her. No doubt who sent it. Lucian knew her favorite pages before she did. She placed the book on her nightstand, untouched. Not because she didn't appreciate it, but because she wasn't ready to read it again. Not yet. If you've ever had to rebuild your life from scratch, drop a heart in the comments. This part of Vanessa's journey is all of us. The courthouse smelled faintly of disinfectant and worn wood, that familiar hollow scent of bureaucracy and endings. Cameras lined the corridor, reporters murmuring in low tones, and the muffled clatter of heels echoed against marble floors. Inside courtroom 2B, the verdict was already written in the silence that preceded it. Marcus Sinclair sat at the defense table, his once proud shoulders now slumped, his suit slightly wrinkled. The arrogance that had once been his shield had long since cracked under months of depositions and evidence. The case had dragged for nearly a year. Fraud, obstruction, and financial manipulation within the health fund he once co-managed. He'd refused the plea bargain. Out of pride, out of denial, out of a belief that somehow his reputation would protect him. But reputation couldn't rewrite truth. The judge's voice was even, almost weary. Marcus Elijah Sinclair, the court finds you guilty on all counts. You are hereby sentenced to 12 years in state custody with the possibility of parole after 8. The gavel struck once. The sound was small, but final, like the closing of a coffin. A murmur rippled through the courtroom. Vanessa sat 3 rows back, wearing a simple black dress and pearl earrings, her posture straight, her eyes steady. There was no makeup, streaked by tears, no trembling hands, just quiet observation. For a moment, Marcus turned, his gaze searching for her. Their eyes met. He expected anger, maybe pity, but what he saw was acceptance, not of him, but of the end. The bailiff cuffed him gently, almost respectfully. Marcus's lawyer whispered something about an appeal, but even that sounded hollow. He had lost long before the gavel fell. As they led him away, Vanessa didn't move. Her pulse was calm, her expression unreadable. People whispered around her. Reporters scribbling, spectators murmuring about the fall of a man once admired. But to her, it wasn't a spectacle. It was closure, the inevitable conclusion of choices made and ignored warnings. When the courtroom cleared, she stood. The same church women who had whispered against her months ago avoided her gaze now. Some looked embarrassed. Others looked relieved. As Vanessa exited, she felt no triumph, only a deep, still quiet inside her chest. The kind that comes when there's nothing left to fight for. Outside, the air was crisp. Autumn leaves tumbled across the courthouse steps. She looked up at the gray sky, whispered softly, Let this be the last time I have to bury something that used to love me." 2 weeks after sentencing, Vanessa drove through the winding road leading to Ridgewood Correctional Facility, a low-security prison an hour outside the city. She hadn't told anyone she was coming. Not Claudette, not her staff, not even Amara. The visit wasn't about reconciliation. It was about release. At the reception window, she signed the visitor's log, surrendered her ID, and placed her phone in a locker. The guard, polite but detached, led her down a corridor lined with beige walls and faint fluorescent hums. When she entered the visiting room, Marcus was already seated at the far end, his hands resting on the table, the prison uniform too large for his thinner frame. His hair had grayed the temples. His eyes carried the look of a man finally aware of what pride had cost him. Vanessa sat across from him. For a long moment, they said nothing. Then Marcus exhaled. "You look different." "I am different." He nodded slowly, eyes drifting to her hands. "No wedding band, no pretense. I guess you came to tell me you hate me?" Vanessa's tone was calm. "No, Marcus. Hate would mean I'm still carrying you." That silenced him. He looked down at his hands. "I've had a lot of time to think in here. About the lies, the manipulation, the things I justified in the name of success. You were right. I destroyed what little good I had left." Vanessa leaned forward slightly. "You didn't just destroy it, Marcus. You refused to face it until it was gone. There's a difference." He nodded again, tears welling, but not falling. "I don't expect forgiveness, but I want you to know. I see it now. Everything you carried for me. Everything I made you become." She took a breath, eyes steady. "You didn't make me, Marcus. I chose to fight for you because I believed love could fix what truth couldn't. I was wrong, but I'm not ashamed of trying." His shoulders trembled. "You were the only good thing I ever had." Vanessa stood, gently placing her palms on the table. "Then learn from it. Don't let that be the end of your story." She turned to leave. The guard moved toward the door, but Marcus's voice stopped her. "Vanessa." She turned. "Did he?" He swallowed hard. "Did Wolfe ever?" Vanessa's expression softened. "Lucian Wolfe was never the villain you painted him to be. But he wasn't my salvation either. I saved myself." Marcus looked down again, understanding dawning through shame. As she walked out, Vanessa didn't cry. The grief had passed months ago. What remained now was power, quiet, earned, and self-contained. In the parking lot, she sat in her car, stared out over the wide stretch of fence, and whispered, "I forgive you, but I'll never be yours again." A week later, Vanessa returned to the courthouse. Not for Marcus this time, but for a Ripple Project appeal hearing. She was presenting data on community reintegration programs for women impacted by incarceration. Her presentation was measured, factual, and heartfelt. Judges and journalists attended, intrigued by the woman who had turned her scandal into social reform. When she finished, polite applause filled the chamber. She thanked the moderator and made her way toward the exit. That's when she saw him, Lucian Wolfe, standing by the far column, dressed simply in charcoal gray, observing quietly. He didn't approach, didn't wave. He just stood there, the way someone does when they understand that presence can say more than words. Their eyes met briefly. In that instant, time seemed to pause, not with the electricity of attraction, but with the peace of two souls who had walked through fire and come out changed. Lucian gave a small nod, almost imperceptible, a silent acknowledgement of everything they had endured. Vanessa returned the gesture. No smile, no lingering stare, just gratitude. He slipped out through a side door before anyone else noticed him. No headlines, no intrusion. Later that afternoon, one of the volunteers mentioned seeing a man who looked like that CEO from Wolfe Corp near the courthouse. But Vanessa only shrugged. "He was probably just passing through," she said softly. But deep down, she knew he had come to make sure she was okay. And in his silence, she heard everything he didn't say. That she had become everything he once thought impossible. That he admired her strength, even from afar. And that sometimes respect is the truest form of love. That evening, the city was quiet, wrapped in a cool breeze that carried the faint scent of jasmine through the cracked window of Vanessa's apartment. She sat at her desk, the same one where she had built the early drafts of the Ripple project. A candle flickered beside her, casting soft gold on the pages of her leather-bound journal. The past few weeks had closed a chapter she never imagined surviving. Marcus's sentencing. The final goodbye at the prison. Lucian's silent acknowledgement. Ho's own reclamation of peace. She wasn't celebrating. She wasn't mourning. She was becoming. She picked up her pen and began to write, the words flowing without pause. "Tonight, I realized something. I've spent years existing through other people's reflections. Marcus, loose wife, Lucian's distraction, the community's subject of gossip. But I'm done being defined by proximity. I am no longer someone's shadow." She paused, staring at the sentence. Then she underlined it once, firm and slow. The clock ticked softly behind her. Outside, headlights passed across the window pane. She continued, "I don't know where life will take me next, but I know this. My story doesn't begin or end with anyone else's name attached. It belongs to me. Every scar, every fall, every rise." She closed the journal and whispered, "Thank you, God, for not letting my brokenness be the end of me." She stood, walked to the window, and watched the lights of the city twinkle like 1,000 quiet witnesses. Somewhere out there, Lucian was probably working late, and Marcus was learning what stillness really meant. And Vanessa? She was free, not because life was perfect, but because she finally chose herself. The grand ballroom of the Magnolia Cultural Arts Center hadn't seen this kind of transformation in years. Every inch of it shimmered with meaning, not just glamour. Tall glass vases of fresh white orchids and sunflowers, candles floating in bowls of water, and deep green accents reflected the colors of the Ripple Project's logo. The chairs were wrapped in linen and gold, and the stage, elevated but approachable, had a single standing mic centered under a spotlight. Behind it, a scrolling projector quietly displayed photos and testimonials from women who'd been helped by the nonprofit in the past year. Vanessa stood near the balcony entrance, taking it all in before the official program began. She was dressed in a fitted emerald evening gown that carried strength in every seam. Her hair was pulled into a soft but structured bun, showing her neckline and the quiet confidence in her posture. This wasn't just a fundraiser. It a public reclamation. It was her "we're not going anywhere" statement. The Ripple Project had survived whispers, doubt, and isolation. And now this night was a celebration of every woman who had been counted out, who had sat across from cold legal desks, who had cried alone in parking lots, who had once believed silence was safer than resistance. The soft jazz band played low and clean, setting a warm rhythm for early guests to mingle over sparkling cider, cucumber water, and mocktails crafted by a local black-owned bartending collective. It was important to Vanessa that the event be inclusive and dignified, not gaudy. No alcohol. This was about legacy, not escape. Across the room, her volunteer team moved with practiced efficiency. Jasmine, the law student who'd caught the anonymous Lucian donation months ago, was checking on name tags. Tomas, their in-house therapist, was greeting guests at the community table, and Elaine, a retired judge who now mentored young women at Ripple, was reviewing her short speech notes beside the stage curtain. Everything felt like it was where it was meant to be, except Vanessa's nerves. She hadn't prepared to be emotional tonight. She thought her confidence would carry her. But as guests began to stream in, dressed in silk, lace, and tailored suits, some familiar, some not, her heart stirred with something deeper than anxiety. Gratitude. She stepped aside for a moment, tucked near the staff entrance, just to center herself. Her fingers shook slightly as she clutched her note cards. "Breathe," she whispered to herself. "You built this. You bled for this. And you deserve this." "Sure do," came a soft voice behind her. It was Amara, her cousin, sister, and day one ride or die, dressed in a royal blue floor-length gown with her curls pinned up and confidence radiating from her smile. Vanessa turned and embraced her tightly. "I wasn't crying," Vanessa said, clearly lying. Amara pulled back, and I wasn't going to call you out for it. But yeah, go ahead and cry. This is your night." They walked back out into the main room as the lights dimmed slightly, signaling the first seating call. Waitstaff began to guide guests toward their assigned tables as soft orchestral music played. The ballroom now pulsed with warmth and attention. Conversations hummed beneath chandeliers. The smell of basil chicken and vegetarian risotto wafted from the kitchen doors. Vanessa stepped onto the platform from the left side. As the music faded, she approached the mic to open the night. Not with her keynote, but with a welcome. When she opened her mouth, her voice rang clear, despite the weight behind it. "Good evening, everyone," she began. "When I first dreamed up the Ripple Project, I didn't imagine this. I imagined a one-room drop-in center, some folding chairs, a few brave women willing to speak up. I didn't imagine chandeliers. I imagined survival." The room fell silent, not from discomfort, but from reverence. Vanessa continued. "But as the months passed, I realized something. Survival is not enough. We are allowed to dream bigger. We are allowed to gather. We are allowed to reclaim dignity in public." Applause swelled, not theatrical, but deeply felt. She smiled and nodded. "So thank you. Whether you've been with us since the early days, or this is your first time learning our mission, thank you for believing that justice isn't a favor. It's a right." After her welcome, the event moved gracefully into its first segment. A short film played, a collage of women who had passed through the Ripple program, some speaking, some just smiling into the camera. There were moments where their voices cracked, where pain showed through, but also where joy returned. A few guests wiped tears quietly. One woman on screen said, "I didn't need a savior. I needed someone who saw me as human. That was Ripple for me." At her seat near the stage, Vanessa dabbed at the corner of her eye, discreetly. Later, during dinner, an older man from the legal foundation that once rejected Ripple's funding quietly approached Vanessa's table. "I owe you an apology," he said, softly. "Not just for doubting you, but for not understanding the depth of what you were doing. You didn't just build a nonprofit. You started a movement." Vanessa nodded with grace. "We're still just getting started." A few tables over, Councilwoman Dorsey, once skeptical, now impressed, whispered to her assistant to move Ripple up on the city's community partners list. And throughout the evening, something remarkable began to happen. People who once questioned Vanessa's place in the community were now fighting to be part of her legacy. By 7:30 p.m., the ballroom had become a rotating display of Atlanta's polished elite. City council members, media influencers, high-ranking executives, old money socialites, corporate philanthropists, and more than a few of Vanessa's former doubters. They had arrived dressed to impress, but the real currency in the room tonight wasn't gowns or jewelry. It was grace, and everyone could feel it belonged to Vanessa Sinclair. She moved through the space, like a woman finally recognized for the weight she'd carried. A few guests tried to mask their surprise at how calm, poised, and commanding she was in person. Some expected her to be hardened after the public shaming, the courthouse headlines, the rumors about Lucian Wolfe. But Vanessa was all elegance and no bitterness, and it disarmed them. Councilwoman Dorsey, who'd once hesitated to partner with the Ripple Project, citing reputational Risks now leaned across her table, whispering to a foundation CEO. "She's the real deal. I see that now." Not far off, Mrs. Charlotte Payne, matriarch of a powerful Southern real estate dynasty, watched Vanessa intently from table 7. Months ago, Charlotte had voiced distaste over scandalous associations between the nonprofit and Vanessa's past. Tonight she clutched her glass of club soda tighter with every speaker that took the stage praising Vanessa's leadership and vision. But something changed in Charlotte's expression when she watched the video testimonial from Marla, a middle-aged mother of 3 who once lived in her car after being evicted due to her husband's white-collar criminal charges. Marla had been mentored through Ripple's Transitional Housing Initiative. Now she had a job in the city's clerk office and was paying it forward as a volunteer. "My dignity didn't vanish," Marla said on screen. "It was just waiting for someone to remind me it was still mine." Charlotte exhaled slowly. The footage cut to Vanessa walking Marla's daughter into a school supply giveaway. A shot lingered on them, hugging under a Ripple banner. "It real, not staged, not PR." That image, Vanessa lifting someone else's child without trying to lift her own name, tugged something in Charlotte's chest. As the next round of appetizers began circulating, bite-sized plantain canapes, rosemary grits with goat cheese, and seared mushroom tartlets, Amara floated around with poise, doing quiet damage control with attendees who had once whispered behind Vanessa's back. Amara stopped by the CEO of a local insurance firm who once publicly questioned the ethics of former wives of convicted men, starting justice organizations. "Good to see you here tonight," Amara said sweetly. The woman looked up, visibly awkward. I wanted to see the work myself. The numbers. It's impressive." "Well," Amara smiled, "some things you can't understand from a spreadsheet. You have to be close enough to feel the ripple." Elsewhere in the room, Vanessa's old supervisor from St. John's Memorial Hospital, Nurse Director Sweeney, stood quietly at the bar. Months ago, Sweeney had coldly denied Vanessa's re-entry into the nursing field, citing ethical hesitations. She had sided with gossip rather than inquiry. But tonight she kept her distance, face unreadable, until Vanessa made her way over with intentional calm. "Good evening, Ms. Sweeney," Vanessa said warmly. The woman cleared her throat. "Vanessa, this is something. All of this." Vanessa gave a small smile. "It's real, and it's only the beginning." Sweeney nodded, then hesitated. "I judged you. I'll admit it. I let the noise speak louder than your record." Vanessa didn't gloat. "We all hear the loudest voices first. But healing happens when we learn to listen better." For a beat, the two women simply looked at each other, neither vindicated nor vindictive, just reconciled. Later in the evening, Vanessa crossed paths with Pastor Glenn, who had avoided her after the courthouse fallout and rumors of her involvement with Lucian Wolfe. His public silence had been loud, but tonight he walked over without a sermon or speech. "You've turned pain into purpose," he said quietly. She nodded. "That's the only kind of offering I had left." He didn't ask for forgiveness, and Vanessa didn't offer anything he hadn't earned. But his presence here spoke volumes, even in quiet. The most surprising visitor, however, was Sister Lorraine, dressed in a plum chiffon gown, pearls gleaming under the chandelier light. She approached Vanessa near the silent auction wall during dessert. "I suppose I owe you more than just a plate of humble pie," Lorraine murmured. Vanessa chuckled softly. "You don't owe me anything. I misjudged you," the older woman admitted, her tone layered with both pride and contrition. "But grace has a funny way of correcting us without shaming us." Vanessa touched her arm. "Then let's use that grace wisely. There's more work ahead." As the night pressed on, the room began to shift, not in noise or decor, but in energy. People who had once seen Vanessa as the woman tied to a scandal now whispered words like visionary, resilient, unshakable. Even the event photographer, a soft-spoken young black woman named Rochelle, paused between shots to say, Miss Sinclair, I hope one day my daughter hears your name in a civics textbook. Vanessa blinked. That night, she realized something profound. Respect wasn't given. It was witnessed. And tonight, they had finally seen her, not as Marcus's ex-wife, not as Lucian's, maybe, not as gossip's headline, but as a builder of something bigger than herself. A woman who did not beg for redemption. She planted it. The room was full, warm, buzzing. Jazz floated from the quartet on stage. Plates clinked gently, and champagne flutes caught the amber light like glass constellations. Waiters weaved through tightly arranged tables with silent precision, and the dessert course was beginning to be served. A spiced pear tart with creme anglaise and a ribbon of caramel. Vanessa stood backstage reviewing the next segment of the program when a shift passed through the space. Not loud, not showy, but felt. She sensed it before she saw it. A silence behind a conversation. A ripple through the air. She turned slightly, peeking through the curtain, separating the ballroom from the green room. And that's when she saw him. Lucian Wolfe. He entered without announcement. No press. No board of directors. No dramatic walk-in. Just him, lone. The light caught his profile first. Sharp, familiar, but unguarded. He wore a simple charcoal gray suit, open at the collar. No tie. Not a wrinkle in sight. And yet, he looked softer, not relaxed, but more real. He scanned the room like a visitor, not a conqueror. Vanessa's breath caught gently, but she didn't panic. She didn't move. She watched. Lucian paused just past the entrance, just long enough for someone to offer him a program. He declined it with a small smile. Instead of sitting at one of the few open tables reserved for VIPs, he stepped aside, remaining near the back of the room, hands tucked casually into his pockets. A few guests noticed him, some with surprise, others with recognition. A couple of attendees whispered his name. A well-known tech entrepreneur nodded in his direction, clearly aware of Lucian's social capital. But Lucian wasn't here to network. He wasn't dressed to dominate, and he certainly wasn't moving like a man hoping to steal the spotlight. He was moving like a man who knew the light didn't belong to him tonight. Backstage, Amara leaned toward Vanessa, whispering, "Is that?" Vanessa nodded slowly. "Yes." Mara raised an eyebrow. "You okay?" "I think so," she whispered. Lucian remained near the edge of the ballroom, close enough to hear, far enough to not intrude. He found a discreet place to stand beside the framed Ripple Project timeline display. He kept his focus ahead, on the speakers, the slideshows, the testimonials. He didn't look for Vanessa, not once, not yet. And that said everything. This wasn't a power play. This was presence. After the final dinner plate had been cleared and the house lights dimmed again, Vanessa walked to the edge of the stage for her keynote moment. As she stepped into the light, she glanced across the room, just briefly, and found Lucian watching, quietly. No hunger, no tension, just stillness. She turned back to the mic and began her speech. "I've learned a lot in the past year, not just about justice or nonprofit infrastructure, but about people, about silence, about how fast society decides who deserves redemption and who deserves to be erased." The room held its breath. "I was told I should disappear, that I was no longer suitable for leadership, that my ties to someone else's mistake made me permanently suspect." A pause. "But let me be clear tonight. I was never trying to be suitable. I was trying to be honest. And when honesty costs you everything, what you're left with is something even more valuable: truth." Applause. Lucian's eyes didn't leave her. Not in awe, in understanding. Vanessa spoke of rebuilding, not from pity, but from purpose. She told the story of her lowest moment, not the courthouse, not the betrayal, but the night she stared at her own reflection and realized she'd forgotten her own voice. And then she said, "But here's the gift pain gave me. I remembered that I don't need to be someone else's example to be my own revolution." The room erupted, not in a roar, but in affirmation, a room full of people leaning in, nodding, emotionally charged. Lucian lowered his head for a moment, taking it in. Who wasn't clapping? He was listening. When Vanessa stepped down from the stage, she didn't immediately go to him. She stayed present with her team. She hugged volunteers. She took photos with donors. She thanked staffers and caterers. And all the while, Lucian remained near the back, quiet, unassuming, drinking water, not wine, and observing the movement she'd built. At one point, a foundation rep approached him, recognizing his face. "Wolfe, right? Didn't expect to see you at a community benefit. You investing?" Lucian shook his head slightly, voice calm. "Not tonight. Just here to witness something extraordinary." The rep blinked, then nodded. Fair enough. He drifted away, and Lucian went back to his spot. Vanessa finally approached him about 20 minutes later, after every obligation had been honored. She stopped a few steps away. "I wasn't sure you'd come," she said. "I wasn't sure either," he replied. They stood there in the quiet corner of a room filled with elegant chaos. A distant saxophone solo carried over the noise. Laughter and congratulations filled the background like warm wind. "You didn't reach out," she said. "I didn't want to interrupt what you were becoming." Vanessa studied him. His posture was humble, shoulders relaxed, not a trace of the man who once offered power like a leash. "You look different," she murmured. "I feel different." She nodded once. "You didn't come here for attention." "I came to see the woman I should have seen from the beginning." The words weren't laced with flirtation. They weren't scripted or dramatic. They were just true. Lucian didn't ask to talk more. He didn't lean in. He simply gave her space to decide what the moment would mean. And for the first time since she met him, Vanessa didn't feel small in his presence. She felt seen on her own terms. The night moved on, elegantly paced. The string quartet returned to the stage, shifting the tone to something light and tender, as Ripple's annual silent auction officially began. Rows of framed art from local black female artists were displayed along the west wall, alongside donated spa packages, weekend getaways, and limited edition books, each curated with intention. On the large screens flanking the stage, numbers continued to rise, ticking steadily as real. Time donations poured in through mobile pledges and check-ins at the back of the room. Vanessa had originally set a goal of $250,000 for the evening, a stretch number ambitious but achievable. As she stood near the auction table, speaking with two education advocates, her eye caught the board. $198,300. Just after 9 p.m., the number jumped once, then again, then one more time. $348,300. Gasps and murmurs broke out around the ballroom. Was that a typo? Someone whispered behind her. Did we really just? Heads turned toward the main donor desk. Staff double-checked. Confirmed? No typo. A single line of text flashed on the screen. Anonymous donor. $150,000. The room reacted quietly, but intensely. No applause, just awe. Some to guess who it might be. Others speculated whether it was a tech mogul, a hedge fund partner, or a political name. But Vanessa didn't need the mystery. She knew. Across the room, Lucian remained in the same place by the timeline wall, a glass of water in his hand, his posture relaxed, his gaze fixed on the slideshow of Ripple's community stories playing overhead. He had made the donation, and said nothing. No announcement, no PR, no corner booth conversation about business write-offs, just a silent investment in a woman's vision. Vanessa didn't approach him. Instead, she stepped back into the crowd. She had more to witness. 10 minutes later, the lights dimmed for the final spotlight of the evening, a segment called The Table of Stories. 5 Ripple participants, all former clients turned volunteers, took to the stage to share brief glimpses into their journey. No scripts, just truth. A young woman named Denise stood first. Early 30s, formerly incarcerated for a non-violent offense that spiraled due to lack of legal support. "I didn't know what I was doing," Denise said, into the mic, her voice steady but low. "I'd never had an advocate. I didn't know what a public defender really did. I just knew they didn't remember my name." Lucian leaned in slightly, face unreadable. Denise continued. "Then I walked into Ripple, and the first thing they asked me wasn't about my charges. They asked me what I needed." She stepped down with silent tears and a nod. Next came Lena, a single mother of 2. Then Anaya, an immigration client who had almost been deported over a clerical error. Then Shonda, whose abusive marriage ended in court battles and the threat of losing her daughter. And finally, Marla, the woman whose video testimony had already pierced even the most indifferent guest. She approached the mic wearing a powder blue dress and a necklace made from beads her daughter had strung for her that morning. "I don't like public speaking," she began with a chuckle, "but I like telling the truth." Laughter from the crowd. "I used to think that dignity was something you either had or didn't," she said. "But Vanessa taught me that dignity is like soil. It doesn't matter how trampled it's been. It'll grow something beautiful if you water it long enough." The entire ballroom stood silent. "Lucian, too," she added one last line. "Ripple didn't just help me. They trusted me. And that's something I didn't know I could still earn." Marla stepped down. People clapped softly, some wiping their eyes. And Lucian, he didn't speak. He didn't nod. He didn't move. He just listened. His eyes weren't misty, but his jaw was tight. His shoulders slightly hunched, as though carrying the weight of everything unsaid. In that moment, he wasn't the man who'd once offered Vanessa power like a tool. He wasn't the CEO who'd silenced competitors or outmaneuvered markets. He was a man standing at the edge of something honest, quietly absorbing the full reach of what she'd built. After the testimonies, Vanessa stepped into a quiet hallway to breathe. She needed just a few seconds of silence, away from applause, attention, lights. She leaned against the wall, taking deep breaths, letting the echo of the evening settle. Lucian appeared at the end of the corridor. He didn't walk toward her right away. He paused, watching from a respectful distance. Then, seeing that she didn't turn away, he approached slowly. When he was just a few feet away, he spoke, quietly, reverently. "You didn't build an organization," he said. "Built sanctuary." Vanessa didn't respond right away. She studied him. "You listened tonight," she said softly. "Not just with your ears, with everything else." "I've made a lot of noise in my life," he said. "I figured maybe silence is what I owed you now." Her eyes glistened. "Silence isn't always absence. Sometimes it's space." Lucian nodded. "This was never about me. Not even the donation. It was about making sure you had the wind beneath your wings and staying far enough not to cast a shadow." That stopped her, not because it flattered her, but because it respected her. She didn't thank him. Not yet. Because the truth was, she didn't owe him a thank you for giving something back that he once tried to hold. But she acknowledged him with presence, with openness. "Thank you for listening," she said. "That's more than I expected." He didn't reply. He just stood beside her for a minute longer. No touch, no flirtation, just quiet. Somehow, that said everything. The final segment of the evening had just wrapped. The Ripple Project had surpassed every financial milestone, every attendance estimate, and every emotional expectation Vanessa had placed on the event. Her heart was full, but her feet ached and her shoulders bore the tension of carrying something sacred all night long. The stage had been cleared. The jazz quartet packed up quietly. Guests began mingling near the dessert bar and outdoor garden lounge, some exiting through the ornate archway, while others lingered, savoring conversation and warm lighting. Vanessa stepped away from the crowd, just behind the pillar near the silent auction display. She thought she'd have a moment alone. But then, like a quiet wind, Lucian was beside her again. He didn't speak right away, just stood with her, both watching the last pieces of the night fade gently into memory. "I should go," he said quietly, breaking the silence between them. Vanessa didn't turn to him, but her eyes softened. "You won't have to." "I know," he replied, voice low, "but I don't want to become part of the scenery. This night was never about me." They stood there in the hush of flickering candlelight and muted voices, and then Lucian shifted slightly, not to move closer, but to face her directly. "Vanessa," he said gently, voice barely above a whisper, "can I say something? Just once." She turned to him now. Her eyes met his, steady, unguarded. She nodded. He inhaled deeply. "I don't want to possess you," he said. The words hung there, unrushed, intentional. Every trace of ego had been stripped from his voice. No undertone of conquest, no ownership, no agenda, just truth. Lucian's gaze didn't drop. "I want to learn how to deserve you." The air stilled. Even in the vast space of the ballroom, with laughter echoing and glasses clinking far behind them, everything paused. Vanessa's breath hitched. Not from shock, but from something deeper. A recognition, a shift. That sentence didn't beg for her heart. It didn't barter for another chance. It didn't try to explain away mistakes or romanticize pain. It honored her. It offered nothing but space for her to remain whole. Lucian didn't step forward. He didn't reach for her hand. He waited, silently, shoulders back, eyes clear, heart open. Vanessa swallowed, her hands folded lightly at her waist. She wasn't sure what to say, and for once, she didn't have to. Lucian nodded once, accepting the silence not as rejection, but as understanding, as truth. He looked down, then back up. "I mean that," he said. "Even if you never choose me, I mean it." She blinked, eyes shimmering, not tears of sadness, not desire, something else. Reverence, the quiet kind that lives in the place between goodbye and possibility. Vanessa took a half step forward, not toward him, but into her own certainty. "You know," she whispered, "that's the first time you've spoken to me without trying to lead me." Lucian nodded again. "It's the only way I should have spoken from the beginning." And with that, he smiled. Small, real, raw, and turned to go. He didn't wait for her to stop him. He didn't look over his shoulder. He just respected the space he'd given her. As he walked away, several guests noticed. Some turned to whisper, surprised to see the elusive Wolfe leaving alone, without press or attention. But Vanessa stood still, unmoved, not because she wasn't affected, but because that one line had shifted the room inside her more than any kiss ever could. He hadn't tried to claim her. He'd acknowledged that she was never his to to own. And somehow that made her feel more free than anything she had heard in years. Lucian had left. Not dramatically, not abruptly, just quietly. He walked out the front double doors of the Magnolia Cultural Arts Center into the Atlanta night, without waiting to see if Vanessa would follow. And she didn't. Not because she didn't feel something, but because she didn't need to chase it to know it was real. Back inside, the Ripple team was finishing up last tasks, gathering auction forms, double-checking donation logs, and helping volunteers collect their coats. The ambient lighting dimmed to a soft amber glow. The buzz of the night had softened to warm conversations, satisfied sighs, and exhausted laughter. Vanessa stood near the center of the now half-empty ballroom, barefoot, heels dangling from one hand. She hadn't changed out of her gown yet, but the weight of the night had settled into her body like a warm stone. She didn't feel drained, just full. Full of truth, full of peace, full of her own name. Amara walked over, eyebrows raised slightly. "You good?" Vanessa nodded. "Better than good." Was that what I think it was? It was exactly what it needed to be. Amara smirked. "You didn't kiss him." "No." "You didn't go after him." "No." Amara tilted her head. "So what now?" Vanessa looked out toward the large windows, where the moon hung full and bright over the courtyard fountain. "I stood still," she said, "and in that stillness, there was power." The ballroom cleared slowly. The last of the guests filed out with soft goodbyes and promises to donate again next quarter. The Ripple team celebrated briefly with sparkling cider and hugs. Everyone left tired but inspired. Vanessa remained behind, not as the last to leave, but as the one who had earned the right to lock the door from the inside. She walked the room alone, tracing her fingers along the empty chairs, the edge of the stage, the lip of the podium. Every step felt like it echoed with memory. The speech, the testimonies, the donation, the silence, the sentence Lucian spoke that now repeated like a heartbeat in her mind. "I don't want to possess you. I want to learn how to deserve you." She thought about how rare it was to be loved like that, to be seen without being cornered, to be honored without being consumed. Vanessa stepped onto the stage once more. No mic, no spotlight, just her and the now empty room that had once held judgment, now held legacy. She sat on the edge, swinging her bare feet gently as she pulled out her journal from her clutch, the same leather one she'd carried since the first courtroom visit, since the night she moved out, since the morning she chose herself. She opened to a fresh page and wrote. Not every story ends in a kiss. Some stories end in truth, in stillness, in not walking away, even when you could. She paused, then added, "Tonight, I didn't need to be chosen. I needed to remain whole. And I did." She closed the book slowly. Outside, the wind rustled the trees. She stood up, walked to the large window, and gazed at the moon again. It was still high, still steady, still glowing. She whispered softly, not to anyone else, not to Lucian, not even to God this time, just to herself. "I am not someone's aftermath. I am the center of my own beginning." She turned off the ballroom lights herself, one switch at a time. And as the chandeliers dimmed and the city softened outside, Vanessa Sinclair didn't walk away. She stayed, not because she was waiting, but because she no longer had to run. The morning light poured through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Vanessa Sinclair's new office on the 12th floor of a modest but modern building in downtown Atlanta. The skyline stood tall before her, an ever-moving canvas of motion and ambition. Cars crawled beneath the buildings like veins of determination, and in the far distance, the blue-gray mist of the Chattahoochee Valley curled upward like breath. Vanessa sat behind a reclaimed oak desk, a warm ceramic mug in hand, filled with chai and cinnamon, her daily ritual, On the wall behind her was a framed photo of the Ripple Project's founding staff. Below it, a mural-style print, "We don't need saving. We need space to rise." The office wasn't extravagant. It was intentional. Every plant, every piece of decor, every shelf of books by black women thinkers, poets, and revolutionaries spoke to what she had built, not to impress, but to belong. The new headquarters had taken time. Grants, partnerships, long nights, rewriting strategy documents, but had come together beautifully. Ripple now had 5 full-time staff, legal interns, a trauma support team, and weekly peer support programming for mothers re-entering from incarceration. But office, this corner, was hers. It didn't symbolize status. It symbolized survival and evolution. Vanessa leaned back in her chair and pressed record on her voice journal, a habit she'd adopted when she needed to think clearly. No one else would hear it. It wasn't for Instagram. It wasn't for press. It was just for her. "It's been exactly 14 months since the sentencing," she began quietly. 11 since the fundraiser. 6 since I let go of the last apology I thought I needed to give the world. A day. I'm not surviving. I'm simply here. She paused. Out the window, a bird danced along the balcony rail. This is the part no one shows you. The after, the stillness, when the fight has quieted, and you're just left with the sound of your own breath. A knock came at the door, soft, respectful. Jasmine peeked in, holding a folder. "Sorry. 5th grant confirmation from the Wellesley Foundation just came in. You want to see it?" Vanessa smiled. "Put it on the corner. I'll review it after lunch." "Will do," Jasmine said, giving a little celebratory fist pump before vanishing down the hall. Vanessa turned back to the window. Her reflection was faint, barely visible in the light, but she saw her own outline, upright, grounded, calm. The woman who once doubted her own worth was now running a justice initiative across 3 counties. She didn't need a headline. She had her own legacy. And from this new vantage point above the street she used to feel lost in, Vanessa had finally found what she'd always deserved: peace. The office was quiet now. Jasmine had gone. The midday calls were over. The calendar was clear for the next hour. Vanessa stood alone before the tall mirror mounted in the corner, a full-body glass framed in dark walnut, a gift from Elaine when Ripple first opened the downtown location. Vanessa had resisted hanging it at first. She wasn't ready back then. Not to see herself, not fully. But today she looked and saw the truth, not the version of herself shaped by gossip, not the woman defined by a man's prison sentence, not the one mourned by church whispers or judged by business suits, but the one who stayed when everything else fell apart. She placed a hand lightly on her abdomen. The bump was small, easily hidden if she chose. But she hadn't chosen to hide it. Not from her staff, not from her community, and most importantly, not from herself. And it was in that quiet moment of stillness that her thoughts drifted. Marcus. There were days she still heard his voice in her mind. Its warmth when they were younger. Its frustration when things crumbled. The anger, the betrayal, the plea for forgiveness. The shame that built its own prison, long before the state ever issued a sentence. She didn't hate him anymore. She didn't even flinch when she heard his name mentioned by others. He had been part of her journey, but he wasn't her ending. Marcus was a man shaped by fear, a man who mistook control for protection, a man who thought being powerful meant never being questioned. She grieved the man he once was, but she no longer longed for the version of herself that needed his approval. She had let that go. Lucian, the name alone, carried a different charge, not one of longing, but of awareness. Lucian Wolfe had once walked into her life like a thunderstorm, loud, demanding, consuming. But somewhere between silence and surrender, he became something else entirely. He became honest. When he said, "I don't want to possess you. I want to learn how to deserve you," it was the first time she truly believed. He saw her, not just as a woman, but as a person with her own gravity. She didn't know what they were now. She hadn't defined it, hadn't rushed it, hadn't labeled it. Because for once in her life, Vanessa wasn't trying to fit a story someone else had written. She was just living. Sometimes they talked. Sometimes he visited. Sometimes he brought takeout and sat on her balcony while she did paperwork, never interrupting her flow. He never asked for more. He never tried to impress. He was still earning his place, and that to her was more intimate than any bouquet, any late-night promise, or any whisper in the dark. Shame, it had followed her like a shadow for months, not because of what she had done, but because of what had been said about her. Whispers in grocery stores, cold stares at church, former colleagues who paused just a little too long before saying hello. She had internalized it once, let it sit inside her chest like a stone she couldn't cough up. But now, she didn't carry it anymore. She had rewritten the narrative, because shame is only powerful when you believe it speaks truth. And shame had never met the woman she had become. Strength didn't always roar. Sometimes it just breathed. It showed up in the morning routines, the quiet journaling, the uncomfortable boardroom conversations, the moments where she asked for help without feeling smaller for needing it. Strength was showing up when her knees still felt wobbly. Strength was choosing not to clap back when people questioned her growth. Strength was letting the pain sit in the room and choosing not to let it drive. Vanessa now knew that strength had nothing to do with appearing unbothered. It had everything to do with being honest with your limits and still choosing to show up. Desire? That was different now. It wasn't about being wanted. It wasn't about being chosen. It was about wanting herself, wanting her life, her body, her joy, her solitude, her pace. There were days she felt the hum of attraction rise again, in the middle of a quiet dinner with Lucian, or in a passing glance in the mirror after a long bath, or in the warmth of a summer wind brushing against her bare shoulders. But she didn't chase it. She didn't need to define desire anymore, because the most radical kind of desire was the one that didn't beg for permission. Vanessa stepped away from the mirror and walked slowly toward her desk. She picked up her chai mug, now lukewarm, and sipped it anyway. She returned to the voice recorder on her phone and pressed the button again. Today I looked in the mirror and didn't feel the need to apologize. I am not waiting for the world to affirm me anymore. I am not waiting for a headline, a compliment, or a ring. The woman I see today is not desperate to be seen. She knows she's worthy, and somehow that is enough. She ended the recording, saved it under the title, Truth, Morning, March 18th. Then she leaned back in her chair, her hand resting gently on the rise of her belly. She wasn't finished growing, not in the literal sense, not in the spiritual, but for the first time in her life, she no longer feared the silence, because she had filled it with truth. The late afternoon sun filtered through the office blinds, warming the hardwood floor with streaks of gold. Vanessa stood in front of her small kitchenette, stirring a pot of lemon ginger tea over the single electric burner she insisted on installing, despite Jasmine's teasing. She liked to make her own tea. It kept her present. As she reached for the jar of honey, her hand grazed her belly, the curve just visible beneath her slate-gray wrap dress. Not pronounced, not dramatic, but unmistakable. She smiled quietly to herself. There had been no grand announcement, no photo shoot, No social media post or press release. Just a quiet acceptance of what her body was doing, what her heart was preparing for, and what her life was now unfolding into. Vanessa had spent years being defined by relationships, Marcus's wife, Lucian's temptation, the center of community gossip. This pregnancy wasn't a rebirth through someone else's lens. It was hers. She hadn't told many people yet. Just Amara. Jasmine had figured it out on her own. Elaine knew too. She had seen the signs, the glow, the way Vanessa paused in conversation now and again, gently pressing her palm to her stomach like grounding herself. And Lucian, he knew. He hadn't asked. He hadn't speculated. One evening, weeks ago, she had simply told him over takeout and warm silence on her balcony. "I'm pregnant." His fork had paused mid-air. He looked at her, not shocked, not wounded, just present. His reply had been simple. "Do you want me involved?" And her answer had been just as honest. "I want space first, but I want honesty too." He nodded. "Then what I'll give you." There was no proposal, no promises, just presence, and Vanessa treasured that more than any declaration. She brought the tea to her desk and sat down, easing into the soft cushions she'd recently added for comfort. The small rise in her belly reminded her of her body's quiet work, creating, forming, becoming. She often wondered what kind of world this child would enter, not just politically or economically, but emotionally. Would they feel pressure to be perfect? Would they feel free to become without expectations? Would they know that strength isn't about pretending, but about enduring? Vanessa touched the bump gently. "I'll raise you to know yourself," she whispered, "before the world tells you who to be." The baby kicked, light, fluttering like a yes. The door opened softly. Elaine poked her head in. "Don't get up. I just came to drop off the mentorship flyers." Vanessa smiled. "Thank you. You're staying for the girls' circle tonight, right?" "Wouldn't miss it." Elaine paused before leaving, her eyes resting briefly on Vanessa's stomach. She didn't say anything, just offered a warm nod that said, "Everything, I see you. I honor this." After Elaine left, Vanessa turned her chair toward the window again. She hadn't expected motherhood at this stage. She wasn't afraid of it, but she respected it deeply. She knew what it meant to bring a life into a world still filled with inequity, judgment, and unseen battles. But she also knew what it meant to bring a life into a world where healing was possible. This child wouldn't inherit bitterness. This child would inherit truth. Later that afternoon, Vanessa moved through the Ripple Center slowly, checking on the conference room setup for that evening's mentorship circle. Volunteers were setting chairs in a semicircle. Jasmine had prepped name tags and affirmation cards. Vanessa walked by the floor-length mirror in the hallway. She paused, looked. The bump peeked beneath her fitted wrap dress, not demanding attention, but asking to be acknowledged. She pressed both hands gently against it and took a deep breath and smiled. This wasn't weakness. This wasn't an interruption. This wasn't someone else's legacy invading hers. This was her body creating a future. A calm washed over her. She was no longer carrying grief. She was carrying life, and every kick, every flutter, every subtle change reminded her that rebirth didn't only belong to trauma survivors or spiritual warriors. It belonged to mothers too, to women rewriting their story mid-sentence, to women like her. The conference room smelled like vanilla and fresh eucalyptus. Vanessa's touch. String lights were draped along the perimeter, soft and warm, casting a cozy glow over the folding chairs arranged in a circle. In the center sat a small table with markers, affirmation cards, and a round mirror framed in bronze. Ripple's Teen Echo Mentorship Circle had started 6 months ago as a trial program, a way to offer young black girls a space to feel seen before the world told them who they had to be. It had become one of the most emotionally rewarding parts of Vanessa's week. Tonight, 12 high school girls filled the seats, ages 15 to 18, each one with different energy. Some sat cross-legged and confident. Others slouched behind crossed arms. A few stole glances at Vanessa, as if trying to gauge how much of herself she'd actually share tonight. Vanessa walked to her seat slowly, her baby bump barely visible beneath her flowy blouse. She wore soft denim, flats, and a pair of gold hoops. No podium, no pretense. Just her, just woman. All right, she smiled. Who brought the quote for this week? A girl named Layla raised her hand. Quiet, but observant. The kind of girl who didn't speak unless she had something to say. Vanessa nodded. Layla stood, voice soft but clear. It's by Maya Angelou. I come as one, but I stand as 10,000. A wave of snaps spread through the circle. Vanessa smiled. Why that one? Layla paused. Because sometimes I feel like I'm not enough, but then I remember my mama, my grandma, my aunties, even the women I don't know. I carry them with me. Like even when I don't have the words, I have them. Vanessa's throat tightened. That's exactly the truth, she said. She looked around the circle, eyes landing on each girl deliberately. No rush, no surface-level hype, just connection. I want to do something different tonight, Vanessa said. No big lesson, no worksheets, just a moment. She reached down and lifted the small bronze mirror from the floor. I brought this mirror for a reason. Not because it's magical, but because it doesn't lie. And sometimes, when the world gets loud, we forget what our own face looks like when we're not performing. She passed the mirror to her left. Take a second. Look at yourself. Not the hair, not the outfit. Look at you, the real you. Then pass it, one by one. The mirror traveled. Some girls looked quickly, shrugging it off with jokes. Some stared for long seconds, eyes softening, lips tightening. One girl, Jade, usually all jokes and sass, stared into the mirror for almost a full minute, then whispered, I don't recognize her, but I miss her. Vanessa didn't speak. She let the moment breathe. When the mirror returned to her, she held it last. She looked into her own eyes. No titles, no narratives, just Vanessa. I used to avoid mirrors, she admitted, because every time I looked I saw someone I thought I had failed. A man, a marriage, a reputation, a version of myself I thought I had to live up to. She paused. But the truth is, the woman I was looking for was always there. She just needed me to stop looking through someone else's lens. Silence. Then Layla said, Miss the Fifth, you make it seem like healing is possible. Vanessa chuckled softly. That's because it is. It's slow. It's ugly. Sometimes it feels like you're going backwards. But healing is just your soul taking its power back. The circle moved on to affirmations. Each girl wrote one thing she'd never dared say out loud. They read them if they wanted to. They folded them up if they didn't. Vanessa walked around the circle, lightly touching shoulders, offering nods of encouragement. Her presence was steady, not intrusive. She wasn't a rescuer. She was a reminder that being whole doesn't mean being perfect. At the end of the session, the girls gathered their backpacks and offered long, lingering hugs. Same time, next week, Vanessa said. Promise, they echoed. When the door finally clicked shut behind the last girl, Vanessa sat back down in her chair. The bronze mirror still sat in the center of the circle. She looked at it again and smiled, not because she felt victorious, but because she felt present. And for a woman who once struggled to claim space in her own life, that was everything. It was well past sunset when the office lights dimmed to a calm hue. Vanessa sat on the couch in the common room of the Ripple Center, feet propped on a footstool, her palms gently resting on the slope of her belly. Her shoes were off, her blouse loose. The day had been full, but not heavy. She exhaled, slow and steady. The teen girl's voices still echoed in her ears. Soft truths, brave confessions, the sound of becoming. A faint knock on the outer glass door broke the silence. Vanessa didn't even flinch. She knew that knock. Soft, hesitant, like someone unsure whether they belonged. She called out. Doors open. Lucian Wolfe stepped in, his tall frame dressed down in a black crewneck, slate gray joggers, and running shoes. His hair had grown in a little at the sides, a slight stubble across his jaw. He wasn't the cold CEO from the boardroom anymore. He was a man trying. In his hands, 2 paper bags. Smelled like pho from down the block, he said. Thought it might beat whatever you weren't going to eat. Vanessa raised an eyebrow. Bold, you, to assume I wasn't eating. I'm willing to be wrong, he replied, setting the bags on the coffee table. She didn't answer, but she didn't protest either. Lucian sat across from her. Not close, just present. He pulled out 2 containers, chopsticks, and a bottle of cucumber water. She noticed his hands, calloused slightly at the edges. He'd been working on his late father's house in Sandy Springs, flipping it himself instead of outsourcing it. He said it kept him grounded. They ate in silence. For a while, the quiet wasn't awkward. It was earned. Vanessa's phone buzzed beside her. She checked the screen. A text from Jasmine. Jasmine, mentorship flyers already got 3 schools interested. We're doing it. 5th for real. Vanessa smiled, typing back a simple, yes, we are. Lucian watched her, not staring, observing. Good day, he asked. She nodded. The girls. They're teaching me how to be softer, how to listen without fixing. I needed that. He looked down at his container, stirring the noodles slowly. I used to think listening was weak, he admitted. I thought if I didn't solve it, I wasn't useful. Vanessa looked up, and now he met her eyes. Now I know silence isn't absence. Sometimes it's respect. She blinked, surprised at how far he'd come. How's the house? She asked. Half the drywall is up. I painted one of the rooms just to feel like I finished something. What color? He smirked. Warm beige. Vanessa laughed. You've gone domestic. He chuckled, too. I'm trying not to hide behind status anymore. No suits. No curated confidence. Just me. Learning. She nodded slowly. I can tell, she said. Lucian leaned back slightly, letting the moment stretch. Then he reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small, black notebook, frayed at the edges. He handed it to her without a word. She opened it. Inside, handwritten pages of reflections. Not business notes. Not legal strategy. Him on paper. Honest. One entry. Read, I don't want to possess her. I want to learn how to deserve her. Vanessa's breath caught. She closed the notebook, set it on the table, and leaned back into the couch cushions. Lucian didn't speak again. He didn't ask what she thought. He didn't reach for her hand. He just sat there, waiting, knowing that presence had to replace performance. After a long pause, Vanessa finally said, You're not who you were. He nodded. Neither are you Her eyes met his. There was no invitation in her gaze. But was no dismissal either. Lucian stood. "I'll take the trash out on my way," he said, lifting the bags. She didn't stop him as he walked toward the door. He paused, then turned back, hesitating only once. "I'll be outside if you need anything. Or if you don't, just here." Then he left. Vanessa sat alone in the quiet again. Only this time, she wasn't lonely. She picked up the notebook again, flipped to the line, read it out loud. "I don't want to possess you. I want to learn how to deserve you." She closed the book and smiled faintly, not because he did it, but because he meant it. The sky outside her office window was a watercolor of dawn, blush and gold threading across glass towers downtown. From her desk, Vanessa could see the slow stir of Atlanta waking up. Cars inching forward, street vendors opening stalls, women in suits walking briskly, holding coffee and ambition. Inside her office, a stillness held. No noise, no hurry, just her. She sat behind a wide oak desk that didn't tower over the room. It grounded it. The walls were lined with art from local black women painters. One frame held the words, "You are your mother's wildest dream." Vanessa leaned back in her chair, one hand resting gently on her belly. The curve of her pregnancy was subtle, but undeniable now. A quiet fullness beneath the silk wrap dress she wore. It wasn't something she hid. It wasn't something she announced either. It just was, like healing, like choosing peace over proving a point. Her assistant had already dropped off a folder with grant proposals and a binder of school outreach plans. Jasmine had left a sticky note that said, "You good. You're glowing, sis, like peace glowing." Vanessa smiled softly. It wasn't the smile of victory. It was the smile of someone who no longer needed one. She turned in her chair and glanced at the books on the shelf behind her. Toni Morrison, Bell Hooks, Maya Angelou, Michelle Obama. Not idols, mirrors. Her phone buzzed. A soft chime. She picked it up. Lucian, outside. No rush. Vanessa stood and walked to the window. She looked down 5 floors below. There he was, leaning against his Jeep, 2 bags of breakfast in hand. No blazer, no image control. Just Lucian in jeans and a simple jacket, glancing up once, then looking away respectfully. Still learning, still earning. She didn't text back, didn't wave. She didn't need to. 15 minutes later, she walked into the Ripple Center's community hall with her heels clicking softly against the polished wood. A mentorship brunch was scheduled to begin soon. Girls would flood in with laughter, loud confidence, and unspoken questions. Some mothers would come too, hopeful, protective, skeptical. Vanessa wasn't nervous. She wasn't trying to prove anything anymore. She was simply ready to serve. In the back corner, Lucian set the food on the table. He glanced up at her, but didn't approach, just gave her a small nod of acknowledgement, like he understood. Vanessa walked to the front of the room and began setting up name cards and journals. She could feel him behind her, but he wasn't hovering. He was waiting, present, not pressing. It made her heart swell, not with desire, but with dignity. When the brunch began, the room was full of light and chatter. Young girls from the mentorship circle mingled with new faces. Jasmine took the mic and welcomed everyone, acknowledging the vision that brought them here. Vanessa's name was mentioned, followed by applause. She stepped forward to speak, not as a keynote, but as a witness, a woman who had walked through fire and found the mirror waiting on the other side. "I used to believe," she said, "that love meant shrinking to fit someone else's needs, that to be chosen meant to be silent about your truth. But today I stand in front of you, not because I was rescued, but because I rescued myself." She looked around the room. "And I want every girl, every woman to know your story doesn't have to be loud to be revolutionary. Sometimes the quietest choices carry the most power." The room hushed. Lucian stood in the back, his hands in his pockets, his eyes never leaving her. But this wasn't his moment, was hers. Later, when the brunch ended and the last guest left, Vanessa stayed behind to collect leftover journals. She turned off the lights one by one. As she stepped out into the hallway, Lucian was waiting by the elevator, hands full of trash bags and cleaning supplies. "I figured you'd try to do it all yourself," he said. She smiled. "I'm learning to let people help," she replied. He held out a bag for her. She took it, walking beside him toward the back exit. Outside, the day had bloomed. Children's laughter carried from a nearby park. A breeze swept through her curls, and for once, she didn't reach to tame them. Lucian opened the Jeep's trunk and tossed the bags in. Then he turned, slowly. No pressure in his eyes, no expectation, just curiosity. "Respect? You okay?" he asked. Vanessa nodded. "I'm whole." A pause. He stepped forward, close enough to see her eyes clearly. "I don't need to be your ending," he said gently. "But I'd be honored to be part of your peace." Vanessa didn't reply right away. She looked past him, toward the Ripple Center, then down at her own hand, resting on her stomach. "I'm not choosing between men anymore," she said. "I'm choosing me, every time. And if someone wants to walk beside me, it has to be with open hands, not closed fists." Lucian nodded, slowly. "Then I'll walk, as long as it takes." She smiled, not for him, not even because of him, but because she was finally the woman in her own mirror. What did this story teach you about power, pain, and rediscovering your worth? Drop your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe to Fatal Embrace for more stories that hit where it hurts and heals